Hey guys, tonight we're going back, way back, to the dusty brick streets of Mohenjo-Daro, a city older than the Romans, older than the pyramids, and yet weirdly obsessed with things like sewer design and public cleanliness. You're going to start your day in a place where every brick is suspiciously uniform, where people bathed together without batting an eye, and where private toilets were considered standard. Yes, even before the wheel had its glow-up. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop your location and local time in the comments. Let's see where everyone's dozing off from tonight. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You arrive in silence. No blaring horns, no impatient goats, just the hum of wind skimming across low, sun-baked brick walls. The Indus River is somewhere to your west, but here in Mohenjo-Daro, the streets are quiet. There's a strange symmetry to the place. Every lane, every home, every wall feels intentional. It's not the wild chaos of some ancient settlements, where buildings pile up like unplanned Tetris. No, this city feels curated. You trudge forward, brushing your fingers against walls made from identical reddish-brown bricks. Uniform, each one the size of a modern loaf of bread. The city planners here didn't mess around. These bricks are all baked to a consistent size and shape, which historians say made it easier to repair walls or replace pieces. Imagine needing a new brick and knowing the exact model number. In 2600 BCE, you round a corner and it hits you. The entire city's laid out in a grid. A literal grid. The kind of thing your urban planning app would generate if you clicked Structured Layout. Streets intersect at right angles, wide enough for ox carts and foot traffic. Some paths are narrow alleys, others open into broader boulevards where the morning sun now pools, warming the brick under your feet. You're standing in the lower city, the residential area. The buildings are modest, some 2 stories high, some simple one-room setups. Most are windowless from the outside, but as you peek through open doorways, you catch glimpses of courtyards and stairwells, of pots arranged neatly on shelves, of walls plastered and painted once, long ago. A dog trots past, tongue lolling. You wonder briefly if it's wild or someone's beloved scavenger. The air smells like dust, sun-warmed brick, and, oddly, nothing too foul. You expected worse, honestly. No open heaps of waste, no piles of refuse. You start to notice something even more remarkable. Along the street's edge runs a shallow channel, covered in parts with stone slabs. A drainage system. You bend down and lift one of the slabs. It's heavy, sure, but beneath it runs a cleanly laid-out drain, about the width of your arm span, lined in brick, sloped just enough to carry water or other things, away from the homes. You blink. Did ancient urban engineers figure out storm drainage, waste disposal? Apparently, yes. Historians still argue whether this level of urban design came from central planning or if it evolved more organically over generations. Either way, it's astonishingly effective. The system's elegant simplicity almost hides its brilliance, like someone invented city infrastructure but didn't bother to brag. You step into a side lane now. The bricks underfoot are cool and uneven, worn by centuries of footsteps. You catch sight of a man with a basket. More of a ghost, really, a mental overlay from the past. He's carrying clay bowls of slop to a corner where he empties them down a chute. The chute feeds directly into the drainage system. Just gone. You'd expect things to smell worse here, but the design works. Wastewater disappears into terracotta pipes and subsurface brick channels that crisscross beneath your feet like an invisible map. Some houses even have their own dedicated drains connecting to the city's main lines. You pause to take this in. Imagine a civilization 4,000 years ago where people had access to indoor waste disposal, where every house, rich or poor, was designed to accommodate sanitation, not as a luxury, but as a given. No gold-leafed toilets, no fancy marble thrones, just an honest clay basin and a clever exit strategy. The bricks whisper beneath your feet. There's an odd peacefulness to the repetition. Brick after brick, perfectly aligned, dry-fitted without mortar, each one baked in kilns now long cold. This isn't just construction, it's choreography. Your mind drifts again. Who placed these bricks? Who mixed the clay, shaped it, fired it, stacked it, and then stacked it again? Probably not kings. Mohenjo-Daro doesn't appear to have a palace, or even a clearly defined ruling class. There are no ornate tombs here, no giant statues of stern-faced leaders, just homes, workshops, streets, a bathhouse or two, and this weirdly wonderful obsession with keeping everything clean. You're reminded of an anecdote. Archaeologists have found very few grand treasures here. No gold, no silver hoards, but they've found toys, spinning tops, dice, figurines, signs of play, and you start to feel the hum of normal life under all this structure. Someone swept this street once. Someone else cursed when they stubbed a toe on that uneven brick. Someone kissed someone else on that doorstep. The wind shifts slightly, carrying with it the scent of baked earth and something faintly mineral. You stretch your arms, feeling the warmth of the day beginning to build on your shoulders. In the distance, a bell rings, or maybe it's just in your imagination. A vendor's call, a child's laugh. The bricks beneath you hold it all. The sun climbs slowly. You continue walking, following the path of least resistance. The street guides you gently around corners and over worn thresholds. Your footsteps echo softly between the walls, mingling with those from long ago. And the drains, still here, still waiting, still whispering their secrets below. You stretch your legs and move deeper into the labyrinth of Mohenjo-Daro. And with every sleepy step, you can't help but notice the unwavering regularity of it all. Streets continue to cross at neat angles, lined by brick platforms that may have once hosted vendors, loungers, or the occasional goat enthusiast. This isn't just a city, it's a spreadsheet in physical form. A Bronze Age grid system, laid out with all the obsessive neatness of someone who labels their pantry jars alphabetically. As you walk, you begin to realize that this order is no accident. The grid layout is so precise that some modern engineers have done double takes. North-south, east-west, it's all calculated, intentional, clean. Some streets are wider, likely for carts or communal activities. Others are just narrow enough to let one sleepy pedestrian squeeze through. You take one of these tight paths now, brushing the wall with your fingertips, noticing how cool and rough the brick feels at this hour. It's not just the streets that are aligned. The homes themselves are part of this layout, stacked shoulder to shoulder in clean rows. Most are surprisingly large, multi-roomed, and in some cases multi-storied. You pass a tall structure, its inner staircase still visible, winding upward like a terracotta spine. You can almost hear the soft thump of ancient sandals on those steps, a child giggling as they chase their own shadow up to the roof. And oh yes, the rooftops. Historians believe many houses were crowned with flat roofs, perfect for drying laundry, chatting with neighbors, or just lazing under the stars. You tilt your head and picture it. A slow sunset. Someone rolling out a reed mat, lying back with a bowl of barley porridge in one hand and a vague existential question in the other. Did I remember to feed the goat? Probably not. The layout of these homes follows a consistent blueprint. Central courtyards act as the heart of each dwelling, with rooms surrounding them. Some have small wells inside, a private water source. Others contain a dedicated bathroom space, equipped with a sloped brick floor leading to, you guessed it, a drain. You start to suspect the citizens of Mohenjo-Daro might have been low-key obsessed with hygiene, or maybe they just really hated wet socks. You notice that no building appears grander than the rest. No towering mansions, no palaces with gold-plated walls or 300-room suites. Instead, most homes are built of the same size bricks, the same materials, and a very similar design. Which raises a strange question. Where were the elite? The kings? The high priests? Historians still argue whether this apparent uniformity means the city was shockingly egalitarian, or whether the ruling class simply lived in houses that crumbled less romantically than their neighbors. Either way, there's something peaceful about it. No towering egos in stone, just rows of decent homes lined up like a sleepy neighborhood waiting for the sun. You reach a wide street now, perhaps one of the main roads. It's broad enough for 2 ox carts to pass, or for a small procession of musicians to march along without accidentally trampling someone's laundry. You pass by what looks like a shop front. At least, that's the theory. Small square rooms that opened onto the street, possibly used by merchants or food vendors. You imagine someone sitting cross-legged, offering lentils in one hand, local gossip in the other. Just beyond it, you come across a series of tiny brick platforms, raised slightly from the street. Some have depressions in them, square, deliberate, and a bit mysterious. Were they bases for market stalls? Altars for household spirits? Public checkerboards? No one really knows. The consensus among archaeologists is a firm shrug. But you like to imagine 2 old men sitting cross-legged, playing an early version of chess with carved bone pieces, complaining that kids these days don't respect tradition. You pause for a moment. There's a breeze now, warm and lazy. It snakes its way down the street like it knows the route better than you do. The buildings whisper with age. You feel something strange. Comfort. Even though these walls have been dry for nearly 4 millennia, they still feel lived in, as if someone just stepped out to collect firewood and hasn't returned yet. Your foot knocks against something small, a pottery shard, half buried in dust. You pick it up. The curve of the fragment suggests it was once part of a water jar. There are faint patterns etched along the side, just decorative enough to suggest pride, but not so ornate as to scream royal. You set it back down gently. Someone drank from that, or maybe watered a plant, or washed a toddler's sticky face after fig season. The city grid stretches on. You move forward again, passing more homes, more orderly streets. And in the distance, above the low hum of your own breath, you begin to hear the gentle trickle of something running. Water? Wind? Nope. That's a hint of what's to come. A public bath so meticulously designed, it might make your local gym's locker room weep. But for now, you keep moving. Let the streets guide you. Follow the grid. It won't let you get lost. This city was designed for comfort, for clarity, and maybe just a bit of sleepwalking. You follow the sound of trickling water now, your bare feet brushing against fine dust as the street gently curves to the left. It's not loud, not a rushing torrent, but more like the soft murmur of water slipping over worn stone, an ancient whisper still echoing through the city. The sun is rising behind you, sending long amber streaks across the clay-colored walls. And soon, you reach what feels like the city's calmest heartbeat. The Great Bath. Yes, a bath. But not just any bath. This is the crown jewel of Mohenjo-Daro. You stop at the top of a few shallow stairs and peer down. In the center of a large rectangular courtyard sits a massive sunken tank, carefully lined with baked bricks and sealed with a layer of bitumen, that sticky black waterproofing material that smells faintly like science class. The tank is about 12 meters long and 7 wide, with broad steps leading down into its center from either end. You can almost hear the splash of someone descending carefully, water rippling gently as they ease in for their morning soak. You climb down one of the brick staircases now, feeling the coolness of the basin's edge under your fingers. The walls are built with such precision, each brick still locking cleanly into place centuries later. It's a wonder they didn't fall apart, especially considering this was done without metal tools or cement. Just clay, fire, and patience. Scholars still debate what the bath was actually used for. Ritual cleansing, civic meetings, competitive underwater breath-holding tournaments? Probably not that last one. Most believe it was a place for ceremonial purification, an ancient version of your spa day, minus the eucalyptus towels. You wade deeper into the space, though there's no water here now. Still, the smell of moisture seems to cling to the brick. You imagine early morning footsteps echoing around the courtyard, people murmuring low greetings as they prepare to bathe. Men wrapped in cloth, women perhaps waiting their turn in adjacent changing rooms. The air would have smelled of damp clay, charcoal smoke, and the faint sweetness of whatever oils they might have used, if they used any at all. To one side of the bath sits a small room, possibly a furnace room. It might have been used to heat the water, or at least warm the air. There's no hard evidence of any extensive plumbing systems to fill or drain the bath, but channels do run nearby, suggesting water was brought in by hand or bucket brigade style from nearby wells or reservoirs. The idea of someone spending the better part of a morning filling the pool, bucket by bucket, makes you appreciate your modern plumbing a little more. Or at least it should, until you remember the water pressure in your apartment is about as strong as an elderly sneeze. Still, you appreciate the effort. Someone, maybe many someones, took the time to maintain this space, to keep it clean and welcoming. And not just for rulers or priests. Unlike the monumental structures of Egypt or Mesopotamia, this bath wasn't buried deep inside a palace. It sat at the heart of the city, next to what may have been an assembly hall. Civic, not sacred. Public, not private. You trail your fingers along the edge of the bath, circling it slowly, listening to your own footsteps bounce off the walls. In the soft light, the pool's empty basin almost looks full, filled with the ghosts of bathers long gone. You imagine a father lifting his son into the water, a woman smoothing down her hair as she sinks into the basin, a man reciting a quiet prayer, or just thinking about lunch. The bath is flanked by small rooms that may have served as changing areas, or possibly storage. One has a drain in the corner, so precise it could pass for modern plumbing. Another has remnants of what might have been a fireplace, or perhaps a heating system. The details are vague, open to interpretation. This is one of those cases where historians will politely argue for the next century or two. Was it a sauna? A drying room? Just an empty closet with dreams? You sit on one of the steps now, letting the imagined sounds of early Mohenjo-Daro life play out around you. The bath becomes more than just a place for water. It becomes a focal point for the morning routine, a gathering space, a transition zone between home and the wider world. You start to see why the city was built the way it was, not for grandeur, but for rhythm, for the flow of daily life. And now, as the sun clears the eastern rooftops, golden light begins to flood the courtyard. The bricks glow softly, as though lit from within. You shield your eyes and stand, stretching, ready to move on. But you give the bath one last look. There's something quietly majestic about it. Not because of how grand it is, but because of how useful, how deliberate, how cared for it must have been. You climb back up the steps, your footprints joining the thousands, maybe millions, that have walked this path before. People just like you, waking up, stretching out, heading toward whatever task the day required. Some may have been teachers, others potters, maybe a brewer or two. And someone, probably somewhere, spilled water on the bath's edge and swore quietly in an ancient language we'll never fully decode. But here's the strange part. They were clean. They were organized. They were particular about their streets, their bricks, and their bath time. And now you know. You wouldn't survive 5 minutes without tracking dirt across someone's pristine courtyard. Shame on you. You step out of the great bath's courtyard, the faint scent of wet stone still clinging to your imagination. The streets beyond welcome you with their familiar grid-like calm. The city isn't bustling, at least not in the way you might expect, but it's quietly alive. You begin to notice the water channels now, running alongside nearly every street like quiet veins beneath the surface of the city. Some are open, shallow trenches built from finely laid bricks. Others are covered, capped with large flat stones like secret passageways for very hydrated ghosts. You crouch by one of the channels and peer in, just a narrow chute, expertly angled for flow. Water likely came from nearby wells or elevated cisterns, carried through this network to homes and public spaces alike. You walk a little farther, and the regularity of these drains becomes uncanny. Every few feet, another cover slab. Every intersection, a branch in the system. They even slope downward slightly, away from houses, directing the runoff out of the city. Whoever designed this was either a master engineer or someone who really hated puddles. Historians still argue whether these drains were strictly for wastewater or also for monsoon runoff, but most agree this was one of the most sophisticated sanitation systems in the ancient world. Long before the Romans got their togas in a twist about aqueducts, the people of Mohenjo-Daro were keeping their feet dry and their streets clean. You follow a line of stone covers until you find something even more curious. A blocky brick structure, waist-high, with a circular opening at the top, and a slope leading downward inside. You've just found one of the city's street-side latrines. Not exactly glamorous, but undeniably advanced. You lean over and peer inside. Don't worry, it's long dry. It's basically a very early public toilet. Waste would have gone in here, been flushed with water, and sent packing through the drain system. Some wealthier homes even had private versions of this inside. Indoor plumbing. In the Bronze Age. Go ahead. Take a moment to feel bad about your modern bathroom's finicky flush handle. And here's the kicker. These weren't rare. Archaeologists have identified hundreds of these brick-built toilet platforms across the city. Some with seats, some just open holes, but always with the same deliberate slope, always near a water source, always built into the broader drainage network. It's like they had citywide planning meetings, and someone brought PowerPoint slides made out of clay. You keep moving and find a long trench with a covered section nearby. This was likely a soak pit or sediment trap, essentially an ancient grease trap for solid waste. When drains clogged, they needed cleaning. Some poor soul had the job of opening these pits and scooping out the sludge. Bet you didn't dream of that as your Bronze Age job assignment, did you? Still, you have to respect the system. It's clean, efficient, surprisingly modern. You follow the main drain downhill, imagining water flowing beside you, carrying away the traces of breakfast rinsed off bowls, laundry water, and the more unfortunate contents of those toilet platforms. All moving along, out toward the edge of the city. The roads are still silent, but you hear a distant splash now. Someone drawing water from a communal well. The source of all this cleanliness. You approach and see it. A wide, brick-lined shaft about shoulder height, with steps carved around its rim. A ceramic pot rests beside it, cracked from age but still proud. You imagine a woman standing there at dawn, arms strong from repetition, rope coiled at her feet. She lowers the pot, hears the hollow echo as it touches the water and begins to haul. These wells were public and plentiful. Most neighborhoods had several strategically placed between clusters of homes. Clean water was essential, not just for drinking, but for all that sanitation you've been marveling at. And unlike some ancient cities where access to water was reserved for the elite, Mohenjo-Daro seems to have prioritized availability. You didn't have to know the right priest or bribe a guard. You just showed up with your pot and got in line. Some scholars believe there may have been an understanding, perhaps even rules, about who could use which wells and when. A sort of informal neighborhood rota. Historians still debate whether this was enforced or simply a cultural norm, but evidence suggests shared responsibility for maintenance. A civilization with clean drains and community guidelines? That's either utopia or a housing co-op with very strict bylaws. You move from the well toward a smaller structure nestled beside a home. It's a washing platform, a raised area with a sloped floor, built specifically for laundry or bathing. Water from the well would have been poured here, used for washing, and then directed neatly into, you guessed it, the nearby drain. And it's not just for people. Some platforms may have been used to wash cooking tools, clothes, or even animals. You picture a small goat being wrangled onto one, hooves slipping comically as someone tries to wash burrs out of its fur. Goats are not known for their cooperation, ancient or otherwise. As you loop back toward the main avenue, you begin to see the city not as ancient ruins, but as a lived-in, working machine. One where water moved constantly, into pots, over skin, through homes, down drains, where cleanliness wasn't a luxury, but a built-in part of daily life. These people woke up, stretched, and washed their faces just like you do, except their sink was made of bricks and required some arm strength. There's something weirdly soothing about it all. Maybe it's the symmetry. Maybe it's the hum of logic that underlies every channel, every soak pit, every toilet. Or maybe it's just comforting to know that even 4,000 years ago, people got grumpy about clogged drains. You leave behind the steady logic of the drainage channels, their quiet hum still echoing in your ears like background music composed entirely of trickling water and very precise brickwork. Your feet pad down a side lane, narrower than the main streets, but just as well organized. The homes here press in a little closer, modest, rectangular, and built with the same meticulous care. Welcome to the heart of residential Mohenjo-Daro. You pass a row of dwellings now, some 2 stories tall. Yes, 2. Somehow, in the Bronze Age, without steel beams or electric drills, they figured out how to build a 2nd floor and not have it collapse on them during a dinner party. The lower walls are thick and cool, made from oven-fired bricks. The upper floors may have been lighter, perhaps timber and reeds, now long vanished. But the base is still solid. A few staircases remain, winding upward like invitations to nowhere. You step into one of the houses now. No door, just a wide entrance framed by smooth stone. The inside is dim and hushed, a cool escape from the morning heat outside. There's no furniture, at least not as we know it. Just space, and the silent clues of a life lived. This one has a central room, about the size of your kitchen. On the floor, a square pit, possibly a hearth or a small oven. You run your fingers across the scorched stone. The ashes are long gone, but the heat still seems to hum faintly beneath your touch. Nearby, a few shards of pottery rest like crumbs from breakfast no one cleared up. And here, off to one side, a curious raised platform. Maybe a bed, or a bench, or just a place to keep things out of reach of inquisitive goats. The Harappans didn't leave behind golden thrones or ivory carvings in these spaces. Their wealth was in rhythm, in regularity, in comfort earned through planning. It's the ancient version of minimalist living, with zero clutter and a distinct emphasis on being earthquake-resistant. You cross to the back of the house and find another feature repeated in almost every dwelling: a tiny bathroom. Yes, you've now found your second Bronze Age toilet. This one's tucked into a corner room, with a narrow drain leading straight out of the wall and into the city's wider sanitation system. The platform is raised slightly, sloping toward the outlet. You smile. Even in 2000 BCE, no one liked standing in a puddle. Historians still debate whether these bathrooms were used only for washing or also for private business. The truth is likely both, depending on the home, the season, and the size of your water jug. What's certain is that the people here valued hygiene, and they made space for it, even in their smallest rooms. Now, about the sleeping arrangements. You lie down on the floor for a moment, letting your fingers trace the fine grain of fired brick. It's not uncomfortable, surprisingly. A layer of rush mats or woven fabric would have made it quite cozy, especially after a long day spent hauling grain or arguing about whose goat ate whose lentils. People likely slept in groups. Families gathered close, wrapped in cotton cloth. Some scholars suggest the upper floor may have served as a sleeping loft, cooler at night and breezier in the hot season. There's even speculation that clay braziers, small portable hearths, were used during colder months to gently warm the space. No roaring fires, just a quiet ember glow. Barely enough to toast a fig, but perfect for fending off the chill. You imagine yourself huddled under a cotton blanket, listening to the muted sounds of the city settling down. The flicker of firelight painting soft shadows across the walls. As you stand again, your gaze falls on a low shelf built into the wall. This might have held jars, perhaps for grain, dried dates, or the ubiquitous lentils archaeologists keep finding by the handful. Or perhaps clay figurines. Dozens of small, hand-shaped terracotta objects have been discovered in similar homes. Women with exaggerated hips, animals with exaggerated tails, and in one memorable case, what might be the earliest attempt at a board game. A sort of proto-chess, minus the knights, and plus a lot of guessing. You step back into the alley, noticing how similar each house seems to the next. These weren't castles, nor were they hovels. They were efficient, practical, and nearly identical. Some scholars believe this points to a remarkably egalitarian society, one without kings, palaces, or enormous social divides. Others think the upper class simply lived elsewhere, perhaps in structures made of perishable materials, long gone now. Still, as you pass each doorway, you get the sense of fairness, of deliberate sameness. No one house dominates the skyline. No golden lions guard the doors. Just bricks and silence. The layout of the neighborhood reinforces this idea. Homes are grouped into blocks, separated by streets and connected by narrow lanes. Each cluster seems to share a well, a drain, and sometimes a small open space, possibly a courtyard or common area. You pause in one such space now, its edges marked by sun-warmed brick. You can almost hear laughter here, children chasing each other with reeds, a grandmother scolding them between bites of roasted chickpeas. One curious detail catches your eye. In the corner of the courtyard sits a peculiar cylindrical stone, smooth, tapered at one end, heavy. Some researchers call these grinding stones, or pestles, used to crush spices, grains, and herbs. Others think they might have been symbols, perhaps religious or ritualistic. A few even argue they were early garden ornaments. Historians still can't agree. But for now, let's just say it's for grinding chickpeas. Because chickpeas deserve reverence. As the morning sun climbs higher, the bricks begin to radiate warmth, and the entire city seems to exhale. The rhythms of daily life are humming now, subtle and precise. A pot clinks in the distance. A goat complains. A child's laugh rises, then fades. And you, standing quietly in the middle of it all, begin to feel the strange closeness of it. The intimacy of a society without towering monuments or famous conquerors, but one that somehow made room for water, air, sleep, and sanitation 4,000 years ago. Not bad for people who never once invented a palace. The streets now hum with imagined footsteps, soft leather soles padding over baked brick, distant voices exchanging morning greetings in a language no one alive today can quite decipher. You follow the lazy arc of a sunbeam spilling between rooftops as it points the way toward the neighborhood's beating heart. The communal courtyard. It's not grand. Nothing here is. But it is deliberate. A wide, open square, edged on 3 sides by homes, and on the 4th by a long, low structure with no door. This might have been a shared workspace, a place for grinding grain, drying crops, mending nets, or, depending on the season, just the best possible spot to find shade, gossip, and maybe a break from one's mother-in-law. You step into the courtyard and take a breath. The air is warm, slightly spiced, perhaps from last night's lentil stew, still clinging to a cracked pot drying in the corner. There's a central fire pit, ringed with stones blackened by use. A few burnt fig stems lie scattered nearby. Someone roasted breakfast here not long ago. Well, about 4,000 years ago, give or take. You walk toward a large circular depression in the earth, rimmed with smooth stone. It's a mortar pit, used to pound grains, pulses, spices, possibly with a giant wooden pestle wielded by 2 people at once. A dusty kind of teamwork. You can practically hear the rhythmic thump, thump, thump as someone reduces barley into flour or chickpeas into a paste that's definitely not yet hummus, but might be its great-great-grand-uncle. There's a fringe of flat stones nearby, all slightly tilted inward. This might have been used for drying fruit, sliced dates, perhaps, laid out under the sun like sugary dominoes. Or maybe herbs, fenugreek, coriander, turmeric. The kind of kitchen smells that linger in walls, even centuries later. You lean closer to one brick and swear you catch a trace of something earthy, something sharp. Historians still argue whether these communal courtyards were formally planned or just emerged organically from social custom. But it's clear they were used. A lot. The wear patterns on the stone, the soot smudges, the broken ceramics scattered like forgotten party favors. This is where things happened. Meals prepared, news exchanged, eyebrows raised. A group of women gathers in your mind's eye, strong-armed, laughing, their tunics cinched at the waist. One's weaving a basket from reed, another's grinding spices. A third is balancing a sleepy toddler on her hip, while trying to keep a goat from eating a sandal. The child reaches for a fig. The goat wins. The men? Possibly away at work, tending to trade, crops, or livestock outside the city. Some might stay behind. Toolmakers, elders, scribes, if such existed here. The indescript remains undeciphered, so we can only guess who wrote what or why. But among the fragments we do have, on seals, pottery, and tiny tablets, are hints of economy and identity. Maybe someone here was a record keeper. Maybe someone else was a dreamer with a sharp stylus and a fondness for turtles. In the corner of the courtyard, tucked beneath a small overhang, you find a low platform with rounded indentations. It looks like a mold. But for what? One theory says these were used for shaping cakes of cow dung, which were then dried and stored as fuel. Not exactly gourmet, but highly functional. Another theory? These were for making incense or paste from crushed plants, used in rituals or to ward off insects. Either way, You've now touched something that could have either lit someone's fire or freshened their air. Dual purpose. Bronze Age multitasking. You find a few broken bangles near a step. Terracotta, glazed with a faint greenish hue. Jewelry, yes, but also an everyday item, possibly worn by women and children. Some even had small bells attached, which, if you're thinking ahead, might have sounded adorable right up until your neighbor's kid started running in circles at full speed. A few yards away lies the rim of a broken pot, half buried in the dust. You kneel beside it. The curve is smooth, graceful, surprisingly modern in its proportions. This could have been a water jar, or for storing lentils, or maybe, just maybe, it held ghee, butter's ancient cousin. Clarified, shelf-stable, and definitely good on flatbread. Historians still puzzle over the specifics of Indus food culture. They know wheat and barley were staples, alongside lentils, sesame, and mustard. Dates and melons added sweetness. Fish from the Indus River probably featured in many meals, dried, grilled, or curried long before the term existed. But exact recipes? Utter mystery. You're left to imagine something between hearty stew and proto-chapati, served on a leaf, eaten by hand. The soundscape would have been gentle, not silent, but steady. The grind of stone on grain, the hiss of water poured into hot clay. The murmur of conversation, probably layered with jokes about whose pot cracked, whose kid fell in the well, and whose goat had been mysteriously visiting every neighbor's rooftop garden. Because yes, some homes had rooftop gardens, or at least plant beds. Archaeological evidence suggests the presence of cultivated spaces on flat roofs where herbs or greens could be grown close to the home. Fresh cilantro? Ancient luxury. You climb an invisible staircase in your mind and emerge on such a rooftop now. The city stretches out around you. Block after block of sun-baked dwellings, the great bath shimmering in the distance, a cluster of trees near a possible granary. The wind carries the scent of dust, brick, and something faintly floral. Jasmine, maybe, or just the dream of it. And here, on this rooftop, someone once sat in the early morning sun, sipping from a clay cup, listening to birds bicker overhead, wondering what to make for breakfast. Or perhaps just enjoying a moment of stillness before the courtyard filled again with footsteps and chores. You sit beside them now, quiet and unseen, warmed by the same sun that still rises over Sindh each morning, unchanged and uncaring. And in that stillness, surrounded by the ghosts of daily life, you begin to feel it. That soft, persistent hum of humanity. Endlessly repeating, yet never exactly the same. You climb down from the rooftop slowly, as if your sandals have grown heavier with the heat of the sun and the weight of imagined centuries. The sounds of the city, such as they are, muffle themselves again, and you step once more into the calm rhythm of the household, where another corner of daily life is quietly unfolding. The washing up. It's not glamorous. In fact, it's about as boring history as it gets. But that's the charm. Scrubbed bowls, leaky jars, a dishcloth that may or may not have once been a linen belt. Here in the shadowed rear corner of the house, you find the area that best translates to a Bronze Age scullery, an open nook with packed earth flooring, a few shallow depressions in the clay, and a drainage channel that runs gently downslope. The Indus Valley people were obsessed with water management in a way that modern plumbing engineers might find deeply soothing. Archaeologists have uncovered systems of covered drains, terracotta pipes, and sloped floors designed to move waste and used water efficiently, without needing a full-blown flood to get the job done. Here, that channel likely carried gray water away from the washing space, through a sealed brick trough, and into a public drain that wove its way beneath the street like a very polite ghost. In your hands, a rough-edged bowl, its interior scraped clean of whatever barley mush or lentil stew it held earlier. You dip it into a clay basin, A storage jar half buried in the earth, filled from the family's morning water supply. It's cool to the touch. You use your fingers to dislodge a bit of stubborn residue, and the sun through the slatted wall plays across your wrist in a dappled pattern of light and shade. Next to the basin, there's a shelf. Just a plank of wood, really, or maybe a broad shard of pottery, where cleaned vessels are left to dry. They balance with quiet confidence, each one a handmade masterpiece of function over flair. One cup is slightly lopsided. Another has the faintest pattern of black slip around the rim. A flourish, maybe, or the artist getting carried away during firing. Soap, you ask? Not quite. No bars of lavender-scented anything here. Instead, they likely used ash, clay, sand, or even certain leaves with natural saponins. Historians still argue whether a form of soap-like mixture existed in daily use, but it's clear that these people cared about cleanliness in a very advanced way for their time. You pause, running your hand across the cool bricks, worn smooth by generations of fingers. There's something meditative about this moment, about scrubbing, rinsing, drying, stacking. Even thousands of years removed, the act feels familiar. A rhythm of care, quiet, necessary, and oddly satisfying. Outside the wall, a faint mewing sound interrupts your reverie. A cat. Of course, there's always a cat, sleek, dust-colored, with an air of mild disapproval. She slips past the doorframe like a breeze, sniffing for crumbs or fish bones. She belongs to no one, and everyone. You toss her a fragment of flatbread crust from a nearby plate. She considers it, sneezes once, and pads off with regal disinterest. Beyond the washing space, the back corner of the house opens onto what we might call a utility area. There's a fire pit that isn't quite the same as the one in the courtyard. Smaller, more contained, and probably used less for communal cooking and more for domestic heat or emergency tea-making. You crouch near it and see a pile of fire-starting materials, dried reeds, animal dung, a few scraps of what might be tree bark, Bronze Age kindling. You try to imagine what it smells like burning. Earthy, sharp, with just a hint of, "Please open a window." A flat slab nearby shows evidence of pounding or rolling, maybe dough preparation or seed husking. A wooden roller might have once sat here, worn to a shine from repeated use. It's long gone, of course, but the stone remembers. Historians have long debated whether Indus households followed a matriarchal or patriarchal structure, or something entirely different. The archaeological evidence leaves room for interpretation. No obvious palaces, no tombs stuffed with gold and human sacrifices. Just homes, of various sizes, yes, but with a relatively uniform pattern of design, suggesting a society that may have leaned more egalitarian than hierarchical. Not utopia, mind you, but not a king on a mountain setup either. You find this comforting as you lean against the sun-warmed bricks, sipping from your imaginary clay cup. Somewhere above, pigeons coo. A breeze flutters the edge of a hanging textile, a dyed cotton cloth, perhaps. They did have cotton here, some of the oldest known in the world. Lightweight, breathable, perfect for hot climates. You imagine wrapping yourself in one and sitting very still until the sun moves. Overhead, wooden beams crisscross the open ceiling. Gaps between them allow heat and smoke to rise while keeping the structure light. Some may have supported a loft or storage platform, ideal for grains, dried fruit, or emergency pickles. You reach up toward the beams, brushing imaginary cobwebs, and discover something stuck between them. A bundle of twine, feather, and... is that a bead? Could it be a child's toy? A charm? Or just a random bit of ancient housekeeping that someone never got around to cleaning? This tiny detail, meaningless to anyone else, makes you smile. A thread of personality. A whisper of, Someone was here, and they were a little weird, just like you. You dust off your hands and step back into the main living space. The bowls are clean now, the courtyard quiet. The cat has moved on, probably to ruin someone else's pottery shelf. And the day hums along at its own Bronze Age pace. No rush, no alarms, no to-do lists, just the daily dance of living. And cleaning up after it. You stand in the doorway between light and shadow, where the courtyard bleeds gently into the shade of the house. The hum of the afternoon has deepened now, thick and still as dough left to rise. It's time for another essential slice of Indus Valley life. Preparing the midday meal. You're not in a modern kitchen, obviously. No spice rack, no shiny countertops. But in this quiet corner of the house, on a raised clay platform, or maybe a packed earthen floor, the tools of sustenance await. Mortar and pestle, clay cooking pots, a grinding stone long enough to double as a bench. Here, lunch begins not with a beep, but with the rhythmic thunk of stone on grain. You sit down cross-legged and begin the task that countless hands have done before. The grindstone is heavy, but it slides forward with a sleepy sort of patience, the top roller turning dry millet or barley into a soft golden meal. This is not a task you rush. The rhythm becomes part of you. Push, pull, breathe, repeat. It's strangely satisfying, like kneading stress into submission. Today's menu? Something simple. A barley flatbread, maybe, or a lentil porridge sweetened with dates. There might be wild mustard leaves or gourds stewed with spices so mild they whisper instead of shout. Remember, chili peppers don't exist here yet. They won't arrive in this part of the world for another few millennia after bouncing through trade routes and colonial oopsies. But that doesn't mean the food is bland. You've got turmeric root, ginger, coriander, possibly garlic. Possibly not. Historians still argue whether garlic had made its pungent debut here yet, but the dishes would have been flavorful in their own earthy way. Comforting. The kind of food that tastes better when eaten slowly, with your fingers in the shade. You pluck a pot from its shelf, noting the hand-smoothed lip and the faint fingerprint forever fired into its side. Maybe the ancient equivalent of a handcrafted Etsy tag. You pour water from the storage jar, cool and clear, and set the pot on a simple tripod above the cooking fire, coaxing the flames with dried twigs and a whisper of dung smoke. Yes, it smells weird, but it works. Nearby, someone's been prepping onions, tiny, knobby things that look more like shallots. They're sliced with a copper or bronze blade, not exactly sharp, but serviceable. You do your best not to nick your fingers, and you add them to the bubbling pot, stirring gently with a carved wooden spoon that looks like it's been passed down 3 generations. Over in the corner, a child watches you with wide eyes. There may be 5 or 6, with a half-eaten mango and dirt under their nails. They're waiting for the flatbread. The best part, obviously. You oblige, forming a small disc of dough and laying it onto the flat griddle stone already warming near the fire. The smell rises slowly. Nutty, toasty, almost sweet. You flip the bread with a smooth motion, trying to keep it from burning. You're no expert, but neither were the original residents of this house on their first try. You both laugh when the edges curl up a little too far, like it's trying to escape. Outside, the city dozes. No carts rumble by, no shouts of merchants or clang of weapons. Just the low murmur of neighbors talking through open windows, the occasional bark of a pariah dog, and the quiet crackle of your fire. A tiny ceramic jar sits on the shelf, sealed with a plug of cloth. Inside? Possibly clarified butter, maybe fermented curds. The Indus people may not have invented yogurt, but they likely stumbled across something similar by accident. like so many ancient food innovations that began with, "Well, this smells odd, but let's try it anyway." You spoon a dollop of this mysterious creamy substance onto the warm flatbread and pass it to the child, who devours it with the concentration of someone conducting serious food research. You try a bite yourself. Tangy, slightly sour, and oddly comforting. This is not your usual lunch, but you find yourself liking it more with each chew. On the fire, your stew bubbles lazily. The air smells like turmeric and smoke and barley and clay. You lean back on your elbows and just sit there, existing. In this house that somehow still breathes, still echoes with footsteps and laughter and the scraping of spoons against bowls. Near your hip, a broken shard of pottery lies half buried in the dust. You pick it up. Curved edge, reddish slip, maybe part of a cup. Someone used this once. They drank from it. Maybe they complained about the heat, or shared a joke over lentils, or sighed after a long day of trade. They set it down too hard. It cracked, got tossed. And now it rests here, quiet and forgotten, until you touched it. This is the secret of boring history. It's not boring at all. It's just quiet, intimate, made up of all the moments that don't make it into textbooks but still filled 1,000 lifetimes. And then, the debate returns to your mind about whether these meals were communal or solo, whether families dined together or took shifts, whether women did most of the cooking, or if those gender roles even applied here, as they did elsewhere. There's no solid consensus. The archaeological record offers bowls and hearths, but no dinner party invites. Still, you suspect that food brought people together. It always does. Even now, you and your imaginary Bronze Age family sit together in the shade, sharing a meal made by hand, cooked by fire, eaten with fingers, seasoned with stories. As the last of the lentils disappears, and the flatbread crumbs are dusted off the child's lap, you look around and realize something. You feel full. Not just in your stomach, but in your mind, in your bones, in that part of you that longs for slower days and simpler rhythms. Because here, in this quiet corner of time, lunch was never just lunch. It was life. You wipe your fingers on a scrap of woven cloth, coarse but soft from use, and lean back against the cool clay wall. The meal is done, the fire is dying to embers, and the house has gone quiet again, as if even the walls are napping. But the day's not over yet, not by a long shot, because after lunch in an Indus Valley longhouse, it's time to get practical, cleaning up, reusing, storing, and maybe, just maybe, taking a little time to rest. First things first, you gather the remnants of the meal. The scraped pot, the empty flatbread plate, the sticky child who somehow ended up with lentil stew in their hair. There's no running tap to rinse these items, of course. Instead, you carefully carry the cooking pot out to the small platform near the central drain. Remember that clever water system you admired earlier? It's about to come in handy again. You fill another jar from the communal well or rainwater cistern, pouring just enough into the pot to loosen the bits stuck to the bottom. Using a bundle of twigs or fibers, maybe even river reeds tied into a scrubbing brush, you clean it out. The gray water flows slowly into the street drain, heading downhill towards the public sewer. There's a logic to it, a quiet rhythm. It's not efficient by modern standards, but it's not chaotic either. No plastic containers, no mystery Tupperware lids. Every item has a place, a purpose. And if something breaks, it becomes part of the home. Patching a roof, lining a walkway, reinforcing a wall. Now the leftovers, if there are any, get scraped into a small jar, maybe salted lightly to preserve them. Some get shared with neighbors, or more likely, with the family goat or a pariah dog waiting just beyond the threshold. There's no landfill, no fridge, just a closed-loop system of waste and use, a routine perfected over generations. And you? You wash your hands using a small spouted jar and a smooth stone basin, drying them on your tunic. It's probably linen or cotton, though it's hard to say which. Historians still argue whether cotton was in widespread use by 2600 BCE, though samples from nearby sites suggest it might have been. Either way, your clothing breathes well. Important when the sun is still hanging heavy overhead. The house is now quiet, eerily so. Even the toddler has wandered off, probably in search of something to poke with a stick. And this, oddly enough, is one of the most consistent parts of daily life in hot agricultural civilizations. The midday lull. A proto-siesta, if you will. So you lie back on the woven floor mat and let your eyes drift toward the ceiling. Above you, wooden beams crisscross, holding up packed reeds or even mud-coated branches. Light filters through the cracks, creating sleepy patterns across your face. Outside, a cow moos drowsily. A wheel creaks. A bird flaps once, then thinks better of it. In this stillness, you reflect on what the rest of your day might hold. Perhaps you'll walk to the granary to fetch more barley, or tend to the rooftop garden, if your household's lucky enough to have one. Maybe your task involves weaving, or helping patch a wall with mud and straw, or even mending a sandal with a bone needle and a lot of hope. But for now, your only job is to rest. Your neighbors are likely doing the same. The city isn't dead. It's just holding its breath. Merchants may have stretched out on stone benches. Children nap beside storage jars. Even the livestock seems to have found shady corners in which to dream. It's a shared pause. Silent agreement between man and animal and structure to just be still. You trace a finger along a faint carving in the floor. It's not a letter or symbol you recognize, just a scratch, probably from a pot or a heavy tool. But it feels significant. Because that's what the Indus Valley people did best. Layer, meaning into the everyday. Now your mind wanders, as minds do when the body is still. You imagine a distant friend visiting from another district. What would they bring? Stories from the docks, beads from Harappa, a chunk of carnelian from Gujarat? The region's trade networks were vast and impressive, spanning across river, land, and sea. Someone might casually mention a shipment of ivory heading toward Mesopotamia, like it's just another Tuesday. And yes, historians still debate the exact scope of these connections. Did they sail in sturdy boats, or just float on bundles of reeds and hope? Was trade formalized or more of a barter-based buffet? We may never know the full details. But it's clear that life here, even in this seemingly simple longhouse, was connected to a wider world. You yawn. Not a theatrical, modern yawn, but a slow, deep exhale of someone whose stomach is full, whose chores are done, whose thoughts are starting to drift like silt in a gentle current. A neighbor coughs softly through the wall. Somewhere, someone's grinding more grain, the soft krr echoing faintly down the alley. And the child? Still sleeping. You're tempted to join them. You roll onto your side, pressing your cheek against the mat. It smells faintly of dust and warmth and a little bit of yesterday's fire. There's no mattress, no pillow, but somehow you find the perfect indentation where someone's napped before. Maybe this is what history really is. Not names and dates, but the shape a body leaves in a sleeping mat. You close your eyes for a moment. Just a moment. And when you open them again, the light has changed. The house feels cooler. The long afternoon nap, planned or not, has passed. And outside the walls, life is beginning to stir again. The city wakes not with a bang, but a shuffle, a creak, a murmur. Time to get moving. Again, you rise slowly, blinking in the shifting amber light that now spills in through the open door frame. The sun is lower, casting longer shadows across the packed earth floor. There's a hush still lingering from the midday rest, but it's already giving way to the renewed bustle of afternoon duties. In the Indus Valley Longhouse, the second half of the day is just as full as the first. If not fuller, you stretch, your joints clicking in protest. It's not glamorous, this bit. No heroic trading voyages or priestly ceremonies, but it's what holds a civilization together. The errands, the maintenance, the preparation for tomorrow. And for you, that means one essential task: getting the fire going again. The hearth is central, not just physically, but symbolically. Its smoke drifts up into the rafters, perfuming the air with whatever trace remains of your earlier lentil stew. You squat down next to it, using a small piece of dried cattle dung. Yes, that's the secret sauce, as your fuel. It's surprisingly effective, once dried and stored properly. There's kindling, too. Twigs from the acacia trees that line the outer edge of the settlement. You've bundled them together neatly, because your grandmother taught you that neat bundles catch flame better. Whether that's science or just her opinion, it doesn't really matter. It works. You strike a flint against an iron pyrite stone, sending faint sparks dancing into the tinder. With a bit of coaxing, gentle breath, steady hands, the fire comes alive again, flickering cheerfully as if it too had enjoyed its nap. Now that there's a flame, it's time to heat some water for the evening wash. Not a bath, mind you. No tubs full of scented water here, but a careful, efficient rinsing using a clay jug and basin, enough to remove the day's sweat and dust. You set the pot by the fire and reach for the water vessel, heavy with the last of this morning's draw from the communal well. As the water warms, you prep a few things. You roll out a small mat near the fire for comfort, pull out another bit of millet flour, and give it a quick sniff. Still fresh. Good. You also gather a few dried herbs, mustard seed, maybe fenugreek, something to bring flavor and even, according to local belief, medicinal comfort. You're not the only one at work now. The house is humming again, with light footsteps, soft chatter, the clink of tools. Outside, the street is bustling gently, not in a chaotic rush, but with a determined rhythm. You glimpse neighbors returning from the granary, carrying baskets of grain on their heads. Someone passes with a cluster of fish strung from a reed cord, their wet scales glinting like tiny mirrors. Children giggle in the background, playing some game involving pebbles and loud debate about who cheated. You smile. Civilization, for all its clay bricks and clever drains, is built on these moments, on chores and chatter, on fish and fairness. Inside your longhouse, you carefully ladle the warm water into the washing basin. You wet your face, your neck, your arms. The heat lifts away the dust and dullness, leaving you refreshed. This part isn't ceremonial, but it feels sacred in its own small way. Your clothes, stained by the day's work, could use a wash too, but you're saving that for tomorrow. Instead, you smooth out the wrinkles and head outside with a small clay bowl in hand. Your fire-baked dinnerware, humble and trusty. Because now it's time for the part of the day that blends necessity with pleasure. The errands. You walk down the narrow street, feet slapping softly on the sun-warmed stone. You pass by the animal pen. Remember that clever drainage and sloped flooring? And check on the goats. They blink lazily at you, chewing with the kind of slow determination that goats are known for. One attempts to nibble your tunic. You bat it away gently and move on. Your first stop. The granary. This massive raised structure dominates a corner of the city, its brick walls cool and imposing. You hand over a token, a clay seal or carved weight, part of a system that historians still don't fully understand, and in return, receive a modest sack of grain. It's not a personal stash. Everything is regulated by the community, overseen by elders and record keepers. Historians still argue whether the Indus Valley had a centralized government or a more distributed system of authority. But one thing's certain, it worked well enough to store food for thousands and feed a civilization for centuries. You hoist the grain onto your shoulder and make your way toward a neighbor's home. You owe them some help with weaving, a favor from last week's repair on your clay water jar. This sort of informal exchange is as natural as breathing here. No contracts, just mutual reliance and maybe a slightly passive-aggressive comment if someone forgets. You find your neighbor sitting beneath a woven canopy, her hands dancing rhythmically across the loom. Threads of indigo and ochre snake around her fingers as she works. You sit beside her, picking up the thread ends and mimicking her technique. It's simple, repetitive, almost hypnotic. There's talk of floods from last season, of a cousin's marriage, of the bird that keeps stealing bits of thread. You laugh quietly and keep weaving. The sun dips lower, painting the buildings in honey and bronze. Shadows stretch. The smell of cooking wafts through the city. Roasted barley, onion, cumin. A child cries. A dog answers. Even here, in this simple act of helping with cloth, you're participating in the heartbeat of your community. Every thread, every favor, every grain measured out or meal shared, it all weaves together into a larger story. Not one with dramatic battles or kings in gold, but a quieter, steadier tale. One of hands and hearts and hearths. By the time you leave, the air has cooled slightly, and the sky has begun its slow drift toward dusk. You walk back with your now half-filled clay bowl and a small bundle of freshly woven cloth. A thank you gift, or maybe just a scrap. Either way, it means something. Back in the longhouse, you tend to the fire again. It's still glowing. So are you. You settle back into the longhouse just as the last blush of sunlight slips behind the western hills. The light outside has mellowed into a warm indigo, casting the clay walls in dusky shadows. Inside, the fire offers its own glow. Steady, comforting, and familiar. You hear the quiet creak of wooden rafters as the air cools and the night begins to gently wrap around the house. Now it's time for food preparation. Again. You might be thinking, didn't we just eat? Yes, but this is a society without refrigeration, supermarkets, or Uber Eats. Meals are small, frequent, and always require a bit of advanced planning. Tonight's will be simple, because most meals in the Indus Valley are. There's no elaborate 10-course affair, no royal feast with dancers and wine. Just barley cakes and lentils again, maybe a few pickled radishes or preserved fruit if you're lucky. You stir what's left of the morning's lentils in a clay pot, thickened now after a day of slow cooling. You add a little warm water, coaxing it into a stew again, and toss in some crushed mustard seed and dried curry leaf. The scent that rises is tangy and grounding, a little sharp around the edges, but oddly soothing. As you stir, the pot gently spits and bubbles, and the familiar pattern of cooking draws you into its rhythm. Outside, other households are going through their own evening rituals. The city has a soft murmur now. People exchanging greetings, animals being ushered into pens, the occasional bark or bleat drifting through the air. You can smell smoke rising from neighboring homes. There's something cozy about it, this shared routine. No one's in a rush. It's the same thing they did yesterday, and the day before, and likely will again tomorrow. While the stew simmers, you prep the barley cakes. Simple, flat, and cooked directly on a heated stone. You knead the dough quickly, your hands automatically moving in practiced motions. No measurements here, just memory and texture. You could do this in your sleep. In fact, you nearly do. By the time you've finished, the stew is ready, and the cakes have crisped just enough around the edges. You arrange everything in your clay bowl. No utensils necessary, just fingers, and the rough bread doubling as a scoop. The food is warm, salty, and slightly sour from the preserved lemon you remembered to add. It doesn't win any awards, but it fills you up and calms your nerves in the same way a cup of hot tea might. After eating, you wipe your hands on a cloth, then rinse your bowl with the last of the warm water. Cleanliness is taken seriously here, perhaps more than you'd expect. Archaeologists have uncovered remarkably sophisticated sewage systems in Indus Valley cities. And while historians still argue whether these reflect a centralized municipal authority or clever local engineering, one thing is clear. People here valued order and hygiene. Maybe it's spiritual, maybe just practical. But either way, it keeps you from smelling like a walking lentil. The evening continues with another chore. Light, weaving, mending, maybe smoothing out the family's sleeping mats. These are woven from river reeds or jute. Slightly scratchy, but surprisingly durable. You run your hand across the fibers, feeling where the warp has loosened or where a strand needs retying. It's not glamorous, but it's calming, like solving a quiet puzzle with your fingers. In the corner, your grandfather is sharpening a bronze sickle. He doesn't say much, doesn't need to. The scraping of stone against metal fills the silence like a lullaby with teeth. You glance over occasionally, noting how his hands move with a rhythm passed down through generations. That sickle's been used to harvest grain since long before you were born, and it'll probably keep going long after. Occasionally, someone speaks. A low joke, a question, a yawn. But mostly, it's quiet. Not awkward, just peaceful. Everyone knows what needs doing. No speeches, no hustle. Just the gentle machinery of daily life turning slowly forward. You think about the work tomorrow might bring. There's talk of repairing part of the house wall where last week's rain made the mud bricks crumble. That will take coordination, mixing fresh clay with straw, waiting for the bricks to sun-dry, then placing them just so. It's slow work, but oddly satisfying. Like patching a quilt, one handful of earth at a time. You also consider whether you should visit the city's edge tomorrow. There's a woman there who makes excellent oil from mustard seeds, and you're nearly out. Her place smells like crushed greenery and stone presses. But getting there means crossing the Western Plaza, which means risking running into that trader who always tries to sell you those completely unnecessary shell bracelets. You'll decide in the morning. As the fire begins to shrink into soft coals, the light inside the longhouse dims naturally. You're not exactly sleepy yet, but the kind of warm, relaxed, not sleepy that says sleep isn't far off. Your eyes start to feel heavier. So does your body. You stretch your legs out and shift on the mat until you find a dip that suits your back just right. A dog barks again, far off. A baby cries once, then quiets. You lie back for a moment and let your gaze trace the longhouse ceiling, the wooden beams, the tufts of cobweb, the bundle of dried herbs hanging just above the hearth. Everything has a place. Everything is where it should be. You wonder if the stars are visible yet. Maybe you'll go outside later and look. But not now. For now, you're exactly where you need to be. You're still in the longhouse, curled on your woven mat, half full from your lentils and barley. The fire has dimmed, but its gentle heat lingers, seeping into the packed clay floor beneath you. You hear soft snoring from the far end of the room. Someone's already given up on staying awake, lulled by the rhythm of the evening. But your night's not quite over. There's still one more task to do, checking the granary pots. You stretch, yawn, and pad across the room to the cool corner where the storage jars are kept. These aren't tiny kitchen canisters. They're massive, waist-high terracotta vessels, sealed with fitted clay lids. The city's grain doesn't store itself. You kneel and lift the first lid. Carefully, because your older cousin once dropped one and spent 2 weeks patching the resulting crack with river mud and muttered curses. Inside, barley. Still dry. Still safe. No weevils, no damp. A win. You run your fingers through it, the grains smooth and earthy against your skin. There's something meditative about it, like raking sand or brushing hair. Across the way, in another longhouse, someone else is probably doing this same thing. These pots don't just hold grain, they hold security. If you've got full jars, you can face the next season. If you don't, well, let's just say winter becomes a bit less poetic and a bit more chew-on sandal straps. Desperate. You replace the lid and check the other pots. Lentils, chickpeas, sesame. One is low. Not worryingly so, but enough to make a mental note. You'll need to trade for more soon. Maybe someone down near the southern gate has surplus. Or maybe the warehouse near the dock has a new shipment from a nearby village. Barter is an art form here. Friendly enough, but with undertones of strategy. Think chess, but with legumes. Historians still argue whether the Indus Valley cities had strong centralized governance, or if they functioned as independent urban networks loosely tied together by trade. You, standing barefoot beside your barley jar, don't particularly care. Your concern is whether the guy who sells chickpeas still remembers that time you loaned him extra jute rope. He better. With the jars checked, you return to your spot, brushing aside a curled reed that's poking into your mat. Another snore drifts up from the far side of the house, this one deeper and wheezier. You can't tell if it's your uncle or the family goat. Could be either. Both have spectacular sinuses. Your hands are dusty now, just a thin film of powder from the grain jars. You wipe them on the hem of your tunic and then think better of it. That's going to itch later. You sigh and decide to go to the side basin and rinse with the leftover wash water, which by now is chilly enough to remind you that it's nearly bedtime. Once clean, you run a hand through your hair, which is now officially out of control. You briefly consider getting it cut, then remember your neighbor's last attempt with a bronze blade ended in what can only be described as aggressively patchy. You'll wait. A breeze pushes through the slats in the longhouse wall. It carries the scent of night, cool river air tinged with earth and the ghost of fires from surrounding homes. You inhale, long and slow. Even your breath sounds sleepy now. Most of your neighbors have turned in. You can hear it in the stillness. No footsteps in the courtyard, no pottery clinks or kids giggling. Just the hush of a city at rest. You wonder if someone, somewhere, is still up watching the stars, just like you planned to. But you're not going anywhere, not now. This mat is winning. There's a clay figurine sitting on the ledge near your mat. A woman with a wide, curious face and exaggerated hips. You've seen dozens like it, all slightly different but echoing the same shape. Scholars debate their purpose. Fertility idols, goddesses, toys. You like to think she's just a well-loved household figure, passed from hand to hand, her smooth body shaped by years of fingers. She watches you now with her placid, bug-eyed stare, and you nod politely at her. She doesn't blink. Before you lie down for good, there's one last moment of preparation. You roll out your sleeping blanket, made of coarse cotton, layered with old goat wool underneath for cushioning. You slap it once to dislodge any dust or uninvited insects. Then you lower yourself onto it with a contented grunt. Your spine pops audibly. Somewhere, your ancestors applaud. Your cousin turns in his sleep and murmurs something unintelligible about fish traps. You consider responding, but decide against it. The room is too peaceful to interrupt. Up in the rafters, you notice a gecko has made its nightly appearance. It moves with lazy confidence across the ceiling beam, occasionally pausing as if to judge your posture. You raise one eyebrow. It flicks its tail. The two of you reach a truce. The flicker of the fire's last embers plays across the walls, casting soft, shifting shadows that stretch and shrink like living things. You let your eyes follow them until they blur, And now, at last, you let your body fully surrender. Every muscle unwinds. Your breath slows to match the rhythm of the coals. Inhale, exhale, glow, fade. The Indus Valley holds its breath with you. The longhouse settles. Somewhere, a pot creaks as it cools. Water drips once in the corner. The gecko's gone. The fire sighs. Sleep is almost here. Almost. Morning again. But not the kind of morning you'd leap into with wild ambition and a smile. No, this is the kind of morning where the sky still clings to its gray-blue hush. The fire is out. Your blanket has bunched into a knotted snake around your legs, and your shoulder feels like someone mistook it for a grindstone in the night. You stir, blinking blearily. The longhouse is just beginning to shift. No one speaks yet, just the soft rustle of limbs emerging from wool and reed mats, the occasional throat clear, and the unmistakable creak of someone's knees complaining. A rooster crows half-heartedly in the distance, like even it isn't convinced this day needs to begin. You sit up slowly, feeling the familiar stiffness in your lower back, and that one spot between your shoulder blades that always manages to collect yesterday's work. You stretch. Something pops. Possibly your hip. Possibly your dignity. The floor is cool under your feet, packed smooth by years of use. You walk over to the hearth, still cold from the night, and bend to examine the coals. With a few practiced movements, you stir them back to life, just enough spark hiding beneath the ash to catch the new kindling. A little breath, a curl of smoke, the first flicker of flame. There's something quietly triumphant about that moment. You didn't invent fire, but you did resurrect it before anyone else woke up. Take that, cousin. Outside, the first hints of light stretch across the city. The streets are mostly quiet. A few early risers haul baskets, clucking hens tucked under their arms like squawking handbags. Someone sweeps dust from a threshold, not to clean it, but to reorganize the dust into socially acceptable piles. Priorities. You begin the day's first real task. Water. Again. The water pots are heavy, and always heavier than you remember. You balance one on your hip and another in your opposite hand, adjusting your walk to something that could charitably be called a waddle. The well is not far, just beyond the market cluster. But at this hour, the ground is still slick with dew and the occasional stubborn goat. At the well, there's already a line. Of course there is. You nod at the others, grunts and sleepy greetings all around. One woman hums as she lowers her clay bucket, the tune somewhere between lullaby and work chant. You catch yourself swaying to it. When it's your turn, you lower your rope slowly, feeling the shift as it sinks and fills. Drawing it back up requires more core strength than you care to admit. You make a note to eat more sesame, or fewer barley cakes. Unclear which would help more. Back home, you pour the fresh water into the house's basin, noting with satisfaction that you didn't spill too much. A few drops don't count. That's just hydration tax. Now you move to the quiet chore of prepping the house for another day. You smooth the sleeping mats, roll up the blankets, and knock last night's soot from the hearth edge. There's a rhythm to it. Dust, pat, fold, stack. You're not really thinking about it anymore. It's just what your hands do while your mind wanders, usually toward food, or jokes, or whether that goose from last week ever stopped chasing your little cousin. And now it's time to grind, literally. You sit at the quernstone near the door and begin the slow, circular motion of crushing grain. Today it's millet, a little softer than barley but still rebellious. The top stone grinds over the bottom one, and the grain softens into flour with a satisfying, dusty smell. Your arms ache after just a few minutes. You remind yourself this is the price of carbs. This is the kind of work that seems eternal. The same stones have been used for decades, maybe more. You can feel the indent of time worn into the handle. You wonder how many hands have moved like yours, in this exact motion, on this exact floor. There's something humbling about it. Like you're not just living in history, you're continuing it, quietly and unglamorously, one bowl of flour at a time. Scholars still argue whether households in the Indus Valley were matriarchal, or whether women just held major domestic authority. As you wipe sweat from your brow and keep grinding, you think, if power is measured in who gets things done, the answer is pretty obvious. As the light grows, others begin stirring more earnestly. The longhouse hums into wakefulness. A few children grumble their way upright, dragging their mats like sleepy sloths. Your cousin stretches and promptly falls over. Breakfast chatter begins. Half-coherent plans, jokes from yesterday still making the rounds, and someone already making a case for why they shouldn't have to haul clay today. You make a mental note to volunteer first, just to mess with them. Someone lights a bit of incense, probably gum resin or myrrh. It's not religious so much as comforting, the scent mingling with the warm flour, fresh water, and your ever-present sweat. The air is thick with the smell of routine. If IKEA sold a candle called Indus Longhouse Morning, this would be it. You pause at the doorway, looking out. The sun has cleared the rooftops now, touching the tops of the granary towers and sparkling off distant rooftop pots. Smoke curls from a few chimneys. The city is fully awake. Your dog lopes past, nose to the ground, eyes determined, probably chasing a chicken. Again, you offer a slow clap as he vanishes into the street. He will not return victorious. You go back inside and reach for the finished flour. Time to bake again. But not just yet. For now, you just sit. Let the morning wrap around you like a shawl. Let the light stroke your face. Let the rhythm of life here, simple, repetitive, and weirdly comforting, remind you that sometimes the best way to start the day is slowly. By now the longhouse is fully awake, its walls echoing with the clatter of movement, snippets of conversation, and the uneven rhythm of children arguing over whose tunic smells less like goats. You rise from your perch, dusting off your hands, and tie your sash with the resigned flair of someone about to tackle an annoyingly familiar challenge. The community clay hall. It begins with a walk, not a particularly long one, but long enough to make your knees protest. The path to the clay pits skirts the edge of town, meandering past fields just beginning to green up with the first hints of barley and pulses. Here and there, figures bend in the soft morning light, planting or weeding, their chatter faint and comforting. The scent of moist soil and cow dung wafts up as you pass, grounding you. Not metaphorically, it's literally grounding. Your sandals sink a little with each step. You carry a basket on your back, its woven base reinforced with old rope. It creaks gently with each sway of your hips. The morning air is cooler out here, and your breath still huffs visibly in front of you. You hear a lapwing calling somewhere above. You wish you spoke bird, probably saying something rude. At the clay pit, a few others have already started. You join them, nodding in solidarity. Not much conversation here, just the scrape of tools, the suck and squish of wet earth being lifted, and the occasional complaint when someone hits a patch of grit. You find your spot and begin to dig. The clay comes out in heavy, sticky chunks, clinging to your fingers like it's emotionally dependent. And so begins the great squat and lift ballet of the morning. Your thighs protest, your back twinges. You pause and stretch, hands on hips, surveying the muddy battlefield. It's not glorious, but it's necessary. This clay will line hearths, patch walls, and maybe even become new cooking pots if the village potter's in the mood. Here's your quirky fact of the morning. In some regions of the Indus Valley, researchers have found that the clay used in certain homes contained traces of crushed seashells, possibly for strength or insulation, or maybe just because someone got bored and started decorating. Historians still argue whether this was practical, symbolic, or just the ancient version of, let's try adding glitter. With your basket full and your arms threatening open rebellion, you trudge back home. The walk is slower now, more deliberate. You shift the basket periodically to keep one shoulder from becoming permanently shorter than the other. Back at the longhouse, the others are busy again. Children run underfoot. Someone's grinding more spices. You catch whiffs of coriander and fenugreek drifting lazily across the air like a culinary lullaby. A neighbor pops in to borrow something vague and returns something equally undefined. These exchanges are part of the social dance. No one ever asks, "What exactly are you borrowing?" Because no one ever really returns things intact anyway. You unload the clay near the entrance, giving it a respectful pat. You'll shape it later. Or someone else will. Right now, your stomach reminds you that breakfast remains a myth you've not yet realized. So you get to work making it. You return to the flour you ground earlier, still faintly warm and soft to the touch. You add water, a bit of oil, and some cumin from a tiny cloth bundle. Kneading is a familiar rhythm, one your hands remember better than your head does. You fold, press, stretch. The dough responds with a kind of sleepy compliance, like it knows this dance too. Flatbreads. Again. Always flatbreads. You roll them into little discs, slightly uneven, like the phases of a confused moon. Onto the hot stone they go, puffing up in places, blistering in others, filling the air with that golden, toasted scent that makes all this worth it. You serve them to whoever's around. Your uncle, the neighbor's kid who never left, your cousin who insists on calling them crust pillows, like he's inventing something new. There's fresh curd, some pickled mango, and a dish of lentils from yesterday that's suspiciously better the second time around. And of course, there's chatter. A debate about whose goat ate what. Someone swears they saw a tiger print near the river, though it suspiciously matches the size of your dog's paw. The neighbor's teenage son claims he dreamt he was king and decreed everyone had to wear blue. You ask if he also decreed that he never had to help with chores again. He grins and steals another flatbread. You sip from a clay cup filled with warm barley drink. Nutty, slightly sweet, and possibly enhanced by a drop or two of date syrup. You feel it settle in your stomach, soft and calm. Outside, the sun climbs higher, the air beginning to shimmer just slightly in the heat. You lean against a wall, watching the longhouse breathe and stretch and live. Someone's repairing a broom. A toddler is trying to climb a goat. Someone else is singing softly, badly, but with enthusiasm. You hum along, half a note off. It's strange, you think, how every day can be the same and yet slightly different. The chores don't change, the smells barely do. And yet there's always something new. A different joke, a better batch of pickles, a small victory like catching your bread just as it starts to puff. You finish your meal and wipe your hands on your sash, already streaked with flour and clay and, is that fish? Never mind. You don't want to know. You stand and stretch, rolling your shoulders back. The day is barely halfway begun, and already you've lived a full morning. The rest of it looms ahead. More errands, more food, maybe a little weaving or watching for stray hens. But for now, for just a breath or two, you're still, present, quiet, in a longhouse that smells of cumin and earth and wood smoke, and your weird dog. Outside the longhouse, the day is humming along with a kind of sleepy energy. Not the rushed urgency of a market town. No, This is the soft, steady rhythm of subsistence, of things being done because they must, not because anyone's in a particular hurry. You step out into the bright mid-morning sun, your eyes squinting automatically, and you head toward the stream with a basket on one hip and a small, slightly dented copper basin on the other. Laundry. Of all the daily chores, this one carries a sort of reluctant reverence. It's hard work, yes, but also oddly meditative, repetitive, rhythmic. And when done with others, it becomes a social event with gossip, joking, and the occasional argument about whether ash soap or crushed beans make clothes softer. The path to the stream is well worn, the earth packed from generations of feet. Here and there, clusters of early wildflowers break up the browns and grays, and bees do their important little business, completely ignoring you, just as you prefer. Your sandals click gently over stones as you descend the slight slope toward the water. There's already a handful of women and a couple of older kids there. Clothes, linens, and mysterious cloth fragments are spread on flat stones or draped over low tree limbs like surrendered flags. You nod in greeting and find a spot downstream. The water here runs shallow and clear, cool against your fingers as you set your basin down. Laundry in a Viking longhouse isn't a daily affair in the way you might think of it. Clothes are worn several days in a row, and if they don't outright smell like something died, they're often good to go. Spot cleaning with a bit of vinegar and ash is common, and full washing is saved for when the weather's fair and water is abundant. You begin with the undertunics, coarse linen, stiff from days of wear, now soaked and squished into submission. You work the cloth over a rock, adding handfuls of soapy residue scraped from a chunk made last season. This soap, if you can call it that, is mostly lye made from wood ash and animal fat. It smells faintly of bacon and death. You pretend not to mind. Here's a bit of historical flavor for you. Viking Age soap wasn't always for cleaning fabric or skin. Some sources suggest it was used to bleach hair as well, especially among warriors who wanted a lighter, almost ethereal look. Historians still argue whether this was about looking fierce, appearing foreign, or just sheer vanity. Either way, you're not risking it today. That stuff burns if it gets in your eyes. You chat as you scrub about the weather, the quality of the barley this season, and whether Egil's new pig is a harbinger of good fortune or bad smells. A woman nearby is trying to remove a mysterious purple stain from a woolen shift. She swears it came from some berries her daughter thought were magic fruit. You make a mental note not to eat anything her family offers you for the next few weeks. Once washed, each piece is wrung out by hand, twisted with enough force to dislodge water and possibly shoulder joints, and laid out to dry in the sun. It's a satisfying feeling, watching your hard work flutter in the breeze. Small victories, clean-ish victories. You turn your attention to the linens, sleeping rolls, wall hangings, and the occasional mysterious rag that no one remembers owning, but everyone agrees smells terrible. These take more scrubbing, more elbow grease. You roll up your sleeves, muttering a few half-hearted complaints. Someone makes a joke about you missing your calling as a washer priestess. You bow dramatically and flick soap at them. They yelp and return fire. Peace is not restored. There's a lull in the conversation, and you let your mind wander. The stream babbles softly beside you, carrying bits of foam and leaves downstream. You watch a water bug skate across the surface, like it has somewhere very important to be. A bird calls high in a tree, and you try briefly to mimic it. You fail. Someone laughs. You laugh too. The clothes, now cleaner than before, though probably not by modern standards, are drying on a nearby shrub that's grown to tolerate the community's laundry habits. You rinse your arms in the cool water and splash your face. For a moment, it feels like a spa day. If spa days included rock-washing tunics and dodging soap bombs, on the way back, your basket is lighter but wetter, and you carry it balanced against your hip. The sun's higher now, casting long shadows from the beams of the longhouse, and the smoke hole above is letting out lazy tendrils that drift and curl against the sky. Back inside, a few of the drying garments are rehung in their rightful places, looped over beams, spread across the backs of chairs, or simply laid across the floor until someone inevitably steps on them and mutters. The longhouse now smells faintly of lye, sunshine, and wet wool. Not exactly a candle scent, but definitely authentic. You sit for a moment on a low stool, flexing your fingers. Laundry is a full-body workout, and your shoulders are having opinions. Still, there's a strange contentment to be found in this. Knowing the household now feels a little fresher, a little more put together, and tomorrow it'll all be dirty again. You smile to yourself. That's just how it is. You get up and check the hearth. Still warm, but not blazing. A small pot of beans simmers quietly in the corner, and someone's left a strip of dried fish beside it. You tear off a bite and chew thoughtfully. Salty, chewy, and suspiciously crunchy in one spot. You decide not to investigate. With laundry done, you glance around. There's still weaving to finish, grain to grind, and that one corner of the longhouse where something definitely died months ago, and no one has had the emotional bandwidth to clean it up. But for now, for this brief and quiet moment, you've earned a sit. You tuck a damp cloth under your elbow and exhale, eyes following the beams of sunlight that catch the soft drift of dust above. The day continues, and you, laundry hero of the longhouse, are briefly at peace. It isn't long before the peace you earned begins to shift into that familiar, slow-motion Viking hustle. Because the longhouse isn't just a house. It's a factory, a school, a shelter, and a very loosely run daycare center. So after your brief sit and salty snack, you're back up again, this time preparing to help with one of the most constant and necessary tasks. Processing grain. It begins with the quern. Now, if you've never used a quern before, imagine a large, flat stone with another, slightly domed stone resting on top. The upper stone has a hole in the center where you pour in your grain, usually barley, oats, or rye, depending on the season and your location, and a wooden peg so you can grip and rotate it. You turn the stone, the grain is ground between the layers, and voila. Flour, or something adjacent to it. Also, sore arms. You kneel on a mat next to the quern, your knees already complaining before you even begin. A small sack of grain sits beside you, and with a practiced hand, you scoop a handful into the hopper. Then, grasping the wooden peg, you begin to turn. Round and round and round. This is where the real meditative work begins. The circular motion, the gentle scraping sound of stone on stone, the rhythm you fall into. It's hard not to feel sleepy doing this, even though it's technically exercise. The sound is soft, not unlike a millstone's whisper, and it mixes with the occasional creak of the longhouse beams, the low hum of conversation, and the crackling of the hearth. As you grind, a child wanders over. Someone's niece, or maybe your cousin's daughter, depending on which family tree you're relying on today. She squats beside you, watching the movement with wide eyes. You explain the process in a low voice, and she reaches out to try turning the stone. She struggles, of course, because this is not child's play. You both laugh, and you let her feel like she helped. Grinding grain was typically a communal effort, often done in pairs or with older children assisting. This wasn't just for efficiency. It was social, bonding, and a prime opportunity to share stories, songs, and news. Some scholars even suggest that certain grinding chants were passed down through generations, like lullabies for flour. Historians still argue whether specific songs were meant to encourage speed, keep rhythm, or simply prevent you from dying of boredom. You don't sing today, but you hum a bit. A melody you don't recognize, probably made up on the spot. The girl beside you hums along. Eventually, the basket beside you fills with coarse flour, not the soft, bleached stuff you find at a modern supermarket. This is hearty, textured, and sometimes contains a tiny stone or two. Builds character, they say. And dental bills. You stretch your arms, standing slowly, the knees popping like an old wicker chair. The girl runs off, and you carry your flour to the preparation table, a plank of wood supported by 2 barrels, really, and begin to measure out portions for flatbread. Flatbread is the bread of the everyday Viking. No rising, no yeast, no elaborate braiding. Just flour, water, a bit of salt if you're lucky, and sometimes leftover whey or milk to soften the texture. You mix it by hand, kneading the dough until it stops sticking to your fingers and starts behaving. The dough, once rolled into balls, is flattened with a small wooden press, sometimes engraved with runes or little animal motifs if someone's feeling artistic. You press it, then cook it on a flat stone near the fire or on a griddle if your household is fancy. Today, you're using the stone, warmed carefully on the edge of the hearth so it doesn't crack. You lay the first flatbread on the stone and listen to it sizzle faintly. It's a humble smell, comforting, earthy, warm, slightly nutty. You flip it with a carved wooden spatula, watching the bubbles rise and darken into toasty spots. While waiting, your mind drifts. You imagine a merchant ship pulling into a fjord, the crew tired and salty, dreaming of a hot meal and soft bedroll. You wonder whether they'd appreciate your flatbread or turn their noses up at it in favor of something spicier, imported from abroad. Silly thought. This is survival food, not dinner party fare. Still, it's honest, and today that's enough. You keep going, rhythmically pressing, cooking, flipping, stacking. A small tower of bread begins to form, wrapped in a cloth to keep warm. A few pieces are already disappearing as passers-by sneak bites. You shoot them mock glares. But really, you're glad they're enjoying it. There's a certain quiet satisfaction in making something so fundamental. No glamour, no elaborate technique. Just hands, grain, fire, and time. It's worth noting that the grain itself may have come from your own household's field, or it may have been part of a shared community harvest. Viking communities often worked together during planting and harvesting seasons, knowing full well that nature didn't care about your personal schedule. That same community spirit extends into meals. You offer a piece of flatbread to an elder who sits near the wall, their legs wrapped in wool, their eyes half-lidded from a nap that probably began last season. They take it with a nod, chewing slowly. You swear you hear them murmur approval. Your final flatbread comes off the stone with a slightly burnt edge. You eat it anyway. It's warm and grounding, and your jaw works steadily as the flavors settle into your bones like a kind of edible comfort. You clean your hands on a damp cloth, brush off flour from your tunic, and stretch again, your back now giving a low, theatrical groan. Someone jokes about you aging faster than Thor's goats. You give them a regal bow. Then you gather up the extra flour, tuck it into a small storage jar, and secure the lid with a tightly bound cloth. The rest of the dough goes into a bowl, covered for tomorrow, when it might be repurposed into dumplings, or something even less exciting but no less vital. As the hearth settles into a new rhythm, you find your place by the fire once again. The smells of bread and ash wrapping around you like an old familiar blanket. Another chore complete, another part of the longhouse turning quietly, effortlessly. You rest only briefly by the hearth, just long enough for the heat to thaw your kneecaps. And then it's time to lend a hand with something a little messier, a little more aromatic. Cheese making. That's right. In this Viking longhouse, Dairy isn't just for drinking or splashing into stew pots. It's a whole subculture of sour smells, curdled patience, and low-key alchemy. The milk comes in early, courtesy of the morning milking. Thick, slightly frothy, and warm from the animal. Today it's goat milk, because the cows are being particularly uncooperative, as cows tend to be. A wooden bucket is carefully set down on the preparation bench, and someone, usually the most patient person in the house, which today happens to be you, gets to work. First, you heat the milk slowly near the hearth. Not directly in the fire, mind you. That would scorch it and make the whole house smell like a cheese shop's trash pile. Instead, it goes into a pot suspended over coals, warm enough to coax out the transformation, but not enough to rush it. Cheese, like a good Viking saga, cannot be hurried. Once it's reached the perfect temperature, warm to the touch but not finger-boiling, you add your coagulant. Now, here's where things get wonderfully weird. In some households, this might be animal rennet, sourced from the stomach lining of a calf or kid. In others, particularly further south or west, they might use thistle flowers, or even sour whey saved from a previous batch. Viking cheesemakers were nothing if not pragmatic. Waste not, want not, or possibly die of starvation. You stir gently, watching as the curds begin to form, separating from the translucent whey. It's a bit like watching cloudy snowflakes gather into little islands, slowly drifting apart. There's a beauty to it, a softness. It smells a little sweet, a little barnyard, but not unpleasant, like warm bread, but made of milk. As the curds clump, you ladle them into a cloth-lined strainer, letting gravity and time do their work. Some days you'd press it into hard cheese, good for travel and storage. But today, this batch is destined to be soft, something you'll eat with a spoon, maybe topped with a bit of preserved berries if you're lucky, the kind of cheese that makes people close their eyes when they eat it. A child sneaks a fingerful and instantly regrets it. Too tangy, not enough salt yet. You chuckle. Cheese is earned, not stolen. You twist the cloth into a neat bundle and hang it from a wooden peg, allowing the whey to drip into a waiting pot. Whey, you remind yourself, isn't waste. It's breakfast for the pigs, or the base of tomorrow's soup. Or, if you're really desperate, a sour drink called maisa that some people pretend to enjoy. Historians still argue whether Vikings regularly consumed whey for flavor or necessity. It's a fine line between tradition and punishment. You wipe your hands on your apron and look around. There's cheese in progress, bread already stacked, and flour tucked away. A small wave of satisfaction ripples through you. These aren't grand feasts or heroic endeavors, but they're the lifeblood of the longhouse. Still, there's always more to do. Someone calls you over to help churn butter. Your arms protest. They remember the quern and would like a moment to recover. But you sigh dramatically and shuffle over to the churn anyway. It's a tall, narrow barrel with a handle protruding from the top. You grip the handle and begin the familiar up and down motion. It's like milking a very tall, very stubborn cow that doesn't respond to flattery. Thump, thump, thump. The cream inside sloshes heavily with each stroke. A kind of hypnotic sound, like a gentle tide inside a wooden well. You count your churns under your breath, then lose count around 27 and start over. The room grows warm with effort, and a thin sheen of sweat beads on your brow. Someone teases you about your butter face, and you respond with a mock growl. Eventually, the sloshing changes. It gets heavier, more resistant, until finally, with one especially dramatic squelch, you hit butter. Clumps of yellow gold begin to appear, separating cleanly from the remaining buttermilk. You scoop it out with a wooden paddle, pressing it into a tight ball to force out the last bits of liquid. Salt is added, not just for flavor, but for preservation. A good Viking butter can last weeks, even longer if stored in a cool pit lined with moss and wrapped in birch bark. You make a mental note to bury some later. The buttermilk is poured into a small jug. It'll be used for baking, drinking, or bribing your way out of evening chores. And just like that, the dairy duties are done. For now, as you return your tools to their places, you notice the sunlight shifting against the walls of the longhouse, streaming in golden strips between the smoke holes and door flaps. Dust dances lazily in the air, glowing like tiny spirits. You breathe in the scent of wood smoke, milk, and baked bread. It's surprisingly comforting. Like the house itself is sighing in contentment. You find yourself sinking onto a stool by the fire, arms tired, legs stiff, but spirit gently buzzing. You're not a warrior, not today. But you've made cheese, you've baked bread, you've churned butter. You've turned raw, stubborn nature into food. And in a Viking household, that's no small feat. The chores are repetitive, yes, but there's rhythm in them, warmth in the cycle. Every stirring, flipping, churning moment loops back into the next, like the seasons that frame them. And as strange as it may sound, there's something soothing in that. Predictable, tangible, real. You glance up at the rafters where your cheese hangs, dripping steadily into a wooden bowl. You smile. It's not glory, but it is good. By now the longhouse is fully awake, humming with activity. The fire has been rekindled more than once, and thin trails of smoke rise toward the central vent like sleepy offerings to the cold gods. You stretch your back, trying not to think about how many muscles you've used today that you didn't even know existed. It's time to step outside and fetch water. This is a task that's somehow both meditative and mildly treacherous. The path to the stream is uneven. Mud, rocks, and roots that seem personally offended by your shins. You carry 2 wooden buckets, swinging slightly with each step, and feel the cold air nip at your cheeks. Your breath comes out in soft clouds, like you're exhaling little pieces of your soul into the crisp morning. You reach the stream. It's narrow but lively, chattering softly over stones. The water is clear and cold enough to make your bones flinch. You dip your first bucket, then the second, watching as the ripples fan outward. There's a silence here that's different from the longhouse silence. More complete. No babies crying, no grumbling about chores, no someone loudly clearing their throat in the background like they've swallowed a small drum. It's peaceful. It would be lovely, actually, if the buckets weren't heavy and the water didn't slosh with every step on the way back. You try to walk evenly, imagining yourself as a Viking-era tightrope walker with better posture and worse footwear. On the return, you pause for a moment by the woodpile. You'll need kindling for the midday fire, so you rest the buckets and take a small hatchet from the chopping stump. The logs are half frozen and uncooperative, but eventually, you manage a modest bundle of split wood. You stack it against your hip, retrieve your buckets, and resume your lumbering march back toward the house. Inside, someone takes the water to fill pots for stew and wash basins. Your job here, though, isn't done. Not even close. Next, you help with fire maintenance. Fire isn't just heat in a Viking longhouse. It's cooking, light, drying rack, and social glue. If it goes out, especially in winter, the panic would rival that of losing your phone on a full subway train. You carefully stoke the hearth with new logs, blowing gently to encourage the embers. The flames reward you with a soft whoosh and a delicate crackle that sounds like nature whispering secrets. One of your longhouse mates appears beside you, holding a bundle of herbs. They're not for cooking, at least not all of them. Some are dropped directly into the hearth to scent the air, a sort of natural incense made of dried angelica and juniper. Viking air freshener, if you will. You inhale deeply. A little earthy, a little sharp, but better than goat. Then it's time for washing. Which sounds refreshing, but let's not over-romanticize things. The Vikings were cleaner than their later medieval descendants, true. But personal hygiene in a longhouse is still a bit of a logistical puzzle. You pour some warmed water into a wooden basin, add a dash of lye soap made from leftover cooking fat and ashes, and dip a rag in. You scrub your face, then your hands, wincing as the chill bites your knuckles. There's no long, luxurious shower here. Just splashes, swipes, and a hasty dry with cloth that smells faintly of old linen and pine smoke. Bathing is more of a once-a-week ordeal, usually on Lagardagr, what you'd call Saturday, literally washing day. Today is not that day, but keeping your hands clean, your face fresh, and your dignity somewhat intact, that's a daily struggle. There's a small mirror hanging on a post. Polished metal, slightly warped. You glance into it and catch a glimpse of your reflection. Wind-swept hair, red cheeks, a tiny fleck of butter on your chin that nobody mentioned. Thanks, guys. From here, you move on to check the meat stores. They hang from the rafters. Fish mostly, some smoked, others salted and wrapped in cloth. There's also dried lamb and slabs of pork, all cut thin and cured in the fire's gentle heat. You test a strip with your fingers. Still firm, not too dry. Good. You count the bundles, make a mental note to suggest more salt be applied to one of the back rows, and then steal a sliver to chew on as you move toward the storage chests. Inside, grains, herbs, onions braided like necklaces, and root vegetables packed in straw. Each chest is lined with birch bark to deter insects, nature's Tupperware. You gently rearrange a sack of barley and straighten the carrots like you're posing them for a root vegetable still life. Historians still argue whether the average Viking longhouse maintained this level of inventory management, or whether this much care was more common in elite or monastic settings. But in your longhouse, things are tidy-ish, mostly, except for that one corner where nobody wants to admit the mold is winning. Suddenly, there's a clatter. A bundle of firewood topples from its spot by the door. One of the dogs has gotten into it, tail wagging like it's done you a tremendous favor. You sigh, scratch its ears, and fix the pile. Again, you really should give this dog a job. Back near the hearth, a pot of stew is simmering. It smells rich and savory. Barley, onion, maybe a chunk of that dried lamb. A few wild herbs give it a green note, earthy and just a little bitter. Someone hands you a small bowl to taste. It's hot and filling, and you burn your tongue on the first bite like a true amateur. Still, it's worth it. Food that's earned always tastes better. You clean your bowl, set it aside, and glance around the longhouse. For now, things are calm. The morning chores are largely done. Bread is baking. Cheese is hanging. Water is stored. And fire glows steadily at the center of everything. You lean back against the nearest post, shoulders sore, hands rough, but heart content. Outside, a breeze rattles the roof thatch, and a soft creak runs through the beams, wood speaking to wood. You close your eyes for a moment, letting yourself imagine the rhythm of this place not as work, but as music. Repetitive, soothing, like the world gently reminding you, you belong here. As the sun begins its lazy ascent, casting honey-colored slivers of light through the smoke vent, the longhouse stretches and settles into its daytime rhythm. Morning labor slowly shifts to midday maintenance, and by now, your muscles have accepted that soreness is just part of the background hum. Like the wind through the beams, or the goat chewing something it probably shouldn't. It's time for mending and making. Because even though you're a hardened Viking longhouse dweller now, no amount of bravado keeps your tunic from getting torn, or your boots from wearing thin. So you plop down on a low stool, linen in your lap, a bone needle in one hand, and a bundle of waxed flax thread in the other. Sewing, you quickly discover, is less a chore and more a form of meditation, with occasional stabbings. The rhythm of the needle, under, over, under again, is oddly hypnotic. Your fingers work on autopilot as your mind floats. You're patching a tear in someone's wool cloak. Not yours, of course. Yours is a masterpiece of uneven seams and proud imperfection. But this one needs to last another season, so you try your best. Around you, the soundscape has shifted. There's quiet chatting, the soft scrape of a whetstone over a blade, and the occasional wheeze of the bellows in the corner, where someone's repairing iron tools by the side hearth. It's a symphony of productivity, set to a tempo older than clocks. Now and then, you hear children outside, laughing, stomping through puddles, making up games with rules that change every 5 seconds. They dart in to ask questions, grab bread, or flee from imaginary monsters. Their presence is chaotic, yes, but also grounding. Future Viking warriors? Perhaps. But for now, they're sticky-nosed little whirlwinds in woolen tunics. Back to mending. You've moved on to a pair of shoes. The leather is stiff, cracked from exposure to rain and misadventure. You heat a little tallow, rub it into the seams, then begin stitching with thick sinew thread. The shoes are rough, hand-cut, and vaguely foot-shaped, like something a hobbit would reject as too rustic. But they'll serve. Vikings weren't in it for the fashion runway. There's debate among historians about just how ornate Viking clothing really was. We think of them in practical, dull tones, but evidence suggests bright colors, elaborate trim, and embroidery were all status symbols. You suspect the average Viking's wardrobe was a mix, sturdy browns and grays for workdays, something a bit more flair-forward for gatherings and feasts. Everyone deserves their moment to sparkle, even if that sparkle is dyed wool and shell buttons. As you finish one repair, another begins. Weaving. Not the full-on loom work, that's a day-long commitment, but simple braid work for a belt, maybe. You anchor the strands around your toe and start the over-under pattern, fingers flying while your thoughts wander. Do you remember the spindle whorls you saw by the storage chest? Carved with simple designs, smooth from years of use. One even had a face etched into it. Possibly just a doodle, possibly a ward against tangled thread. You like to think the Vikings believed their tools had personalities. Honestly, after you've stared at a spool long enough, it really does start judging you. Now the smell of bread reaches you. Sweet, nutty, slightly burnt on one edge, but still good. It was baked in a covered pan over the fire, turned a few times, and now it rests wrapped in cloth. It's dense and earthy, made with barley and maybe a handful of dried berries. You break off a corner and chew. It's warm, chewy, and vaguely tastes of campfire and contentment. Time to check the household bindings, ropes and ties made from twisted animal sinew or plant fibers. These secure everything from barrels to thatch bundles to the toddlers. You test each knot like a sailor prepping for stormy seas, which, to be fair, kind of describes toddler behavior. You discover one that's frayed. With a sigh, you undo it and begin rebraiding a new length of rope. The fibers scrape softly over your palms as you twist them together, tight and even. Like braiding hair, but less fashionable and more, "Please don't let this barrel of pickled fish explode in the night." Off to one side, someone is preparing a grindstone, sharpening knives, reshaping a chipped axe. The rasping sound is surprisingly soothing, like a metallic purr. You're invited to try. You grip the handle of a small blade and press it to the stone in long, steady strokes. Sparks dance like tiny fireflies. You don't cut yourself, which is honestly a bigger win than anyone acknowledges. By now, your hands are tired, and your back protests every movement. You glance toward the doorway, where late morning sun spills in like a lazy cat. Outside, someone is repairing a fence post. Another is bringing in reeds for new roof patches. The day moves forward, one task at a time. Inside, the longhouse is beginning to smell of lunch. The stew from earlier has thickened, and someone has tossed in cabbage and chunks of cured fish. It's aromatic. Let's go with that. A smell that lands somewhere between rustic and an acquired taste. But you're too hungry to care. Historians still argue whether the Vikings flavored their food with wild spices or simply embraced the taste of smoke and salt. Some evidence points to herbs like mustard seed, wild garlic, and even imported black pepper in wealthier homes. Here, you're more likely to find juniper berries and onion greens, flavorful if you squint hard enough. As the final mend is tied off, you stretch your fingers and rise from your stool. There's a quiet sense of satisfaction. You haven't slayed a dragon or discovered a new continent, but you've patched, woven, sharpened, and stirred. You've kept the rhythm going, and that counts for a lot in a world without pause buttons. You step outside for a moment. The air is still cool, but the sun has warmed a patch of ground near the longhouse wall. You sit there briefly, letting the warmth soak through your cloak. A hen struts by, giving you side-eye as if to say, "Don't get used to it. There's still work to do." And she's right. There always is. But for now, just for this moment, the longhouse hums without you. A small breather, a soft pause. You lean your head back, eyes half closed, and let the quiet sneak in like sunlight through a smoke vent. Lunch is a quiet affair. After the morning's flurry of chores, everyone settles into that particular Viking longhouse silence, where the only sounds are the creak of wood, the occasional murmur, and the squelch of someone chewing too enthusiastically on cabbage. You sit on your usual spot near the hearth, cross-legged, holding a carved wooden bowl of stew with both hands, like it might escape if you're not vigilant. It's thick, warm, and heavily salted. The bits of fish are flaky, though not entirely free of bones. A turnip chunk surprises you midway through a mouthful, and you try not to grimace. Still, it fills you, which, given the amount of hauling, mending, sweeping, lifting, braiding, and more sweeping you've done today, is kind of the baseline requirement. You're not alone in this low-energy mealtime trance. Elders mumble to each other about the condition of the roof beams. A pair of teens poke each other with spoons until an older woman gives them that look, the universal one that ends all nonsense in a 3-meter radius. Someone refills the stew pot with more water and pebbles for weight. The pebbles aren't for nutrition. They're just how Viking stew keeps its spine. There's bread again, too. A bit tougher this time, probably yesterday's. You dip it in the stew to soften it, and pretend it wasn't briefly mistaken for a roof tile. As your body warms, and the weariness settles deeper into your limbs, your mind drifts again to the structure around you. This longhouse has stood for decades, maybe longer. The timbers groan occasionally, like an old man shifting in his sleep. You run a hand along the edge of the nearest beam, smooth from decades of fingertips, rough in places where the grain fights back. Historians still debate whether the longhouse was primarily a communal family home, or more like a multifunctional lodge shared by several households. Judging by the number of elbows in your ribs, the answer is likely both. When you've scraped your bowl clean, you take a moment to help clean up. Dishes here aren't porcelain. They're carved from wood, horn, or bone, often passed down generations. Yours has a faint scorch mark from the time someone got distracted and left it by the fire. It adds character, you say. Others say it adds splinters. Tomato, tomato. Washing isn't glamorous. There's no sink, just a bucket of water, a coarse rag, and a healthy disregard for the concept of germ theory. You wipe down the bowls and stack them on a shelf, hoping gravity behaves. It usually does, unless it's windy and you've angered the house spirits. Speaking of which, someone mutters a short verse while drying the ladle, a kind of blessing or maybe a habit. Vikings weren't overly superstitious, except when they were. Charms, amulets, small carvings tucked into wall beams, these all dot the longhouse. Little insurance policies against bad luck, illness, or poor harvests. There's a tiny Thor's hammer carved near the threshold. You rub it with your thumb without even thinking. Maybe it helps. Maybe it just feels good. Once the mealtime is over, people shift into smaller tasks. Someone's preparing wool to be spun. Others carry out ashes from the hearth, tipping them into a pit outside where they'll eventually be scattered or used in soap making. You're assigned firewood duty. This is less glamorous than it sounds. You walk out to the woodpile, stacked not so much by engineering standards as by hope, and start selecting pieces. Some are dry and perfect, others are damp, riddled with bugs, or shaped like abstract sculptures. You carry an armload back inside, then go again. And again. Your forearms are on fire by the third trip, but you find a rhythm. Load, carry, stack, breathe. Load, carry, stack, sigh dramatically. It's a quiet time, and despite the aching muscles, there's something satisfying about it. These logs will keep the hearth warm tonight, after all. You're not just working, you're investing in future coziness. As you finish your final run, someone's lighting a side hearth to warm a large iron cauldron. There's the idea of boiling linen to soften it, or maybe to start the slow process of dyeing wool. Natural dyes in this world come from plants, roots, and lichens. Birch bark for yellow, madder root for red, crushed insects for purples and pinks. It's a messy art, prone to unpredictability and smell. You sit for a while, watching a woman stir the contents of the cauldron with a stick almost as tall as you. Steam rises in gentle curls, carrying the scent of something sharp and earthy. She hums while she stirs, a tune you don't recognize, but one that loops with a kind of hypnotic calm. You hum along, off-key, but sincere. Outside, someone is hammering, likely making minor repairs to a cartwheel, or patching a fence post the goats have once again attempted to liberate. Viking goats, by the way, are tiny chaos agents with hooves. You've seen one climb onto a barrel, knock it over, and then act offended that the world is so unfair. You reach into your pouch and pull out a small piece of bone. You've been carving it when time allows. It's meant to be a needle case, or maybe a comb, depending on how many more mistakes you make. Carving is tricky work, equal parts patience and guesswork. One slip, and your ornamental fish becomes a slightly asymmetrical blob of mystery. Still, you chip away at it. The rasp of your small blade against bone is sharp and satisfying. You carve a simple pattern, waves and spirals, like the ones you've seen on the combs of others. Vikings loved their patterns, whether it's ships, clothes, tools, or just the wooden beams of the longhouse itself. They left their marks. The light inside begins to change. Afternoon stretches out like a cat, languid and golden. Shadows lengthen, beams of sun slant in through the smoke hole, and the longhouse begins to feel like it's sighing into evening. The energy shifts again. Slower now, softer. You set your carving aside and stand, arms sore, legs creaking. Around you, others begin their own wind-down rituals, replacing tools, folding wool, laying out mats near the hearth. You're still hours away from true sleep, but the longhouse is beginning to prepare for that quiet descent. And you? You've earned your place in this rhythm. The day's work is behind you. Your stew-filled belly is content. The logs you carried will crackle soon in the fire, and maybe, if the wind is right, you'll even get a night without goat-related drama. For now, take a breath. Listen to the slow sounds of a home that knows itself, its rhythms, and its people. You're part of that now. Frayed tunic, splintery spoon, and all. The longhouse leans into the hush of late afternoon, like an old cat curling up beside a fire. You're moving slower now, as is everyone else. The rush of morning has passed, and lunch sits like a polite weight in your stomach. Time loosens its grip just a little. No one's sprinting to the next chore. Instead, you drift into what might be the Viking equivalent of quiet time. You begin your next small task. Mending. A tunic with a frayed hem sits on your lap, and a bone needle in your hand. The thread is a thick, slightly scratchy wool dyed a dull brown, probably with bark or walnut husk. You thread the needle while squinting, tongue poking out slightly, because some things never change, no matter the century. Sewing in a Viking longhouse isn't a private endeavor. It's communal. Around you, others patch breeches, reattach buttons made from antler, or try to rescue socks from the brink of disintegration. One woman is embroidering an elaborate sleeve cuff with a red thread, though she claims it's just for practice. Sure it is. It looks like it belongs in a saga. Mending here isn't just about clothing. It's maintenance for the soul. A bit like picking lint off your thoughts while keeping your hands busy. You fall into the rhythm of the needle. Push, pull, tighten, breathe. Push, pull, tighten, breathe. There's something inherently soothing about it. Outside, the sounds have shifted too. No more hammering, just the rustle of wind over turf and the distant bleat of a disgruntled sheep. You can hear the faint flap of banners on the roof's edge. Colorful strips of cloth dyed with whatever plants they could scrounge up. Historians still argue whether these flags were purely decorative or carried spiritual meaning. Maybe both. Or maybe they just liked how they danced in the wind? Who doesn't? Occasionally, a younger child will wander by and plop down beside you, sticky fingers clutching a wooden toy. These little carved figures are often animals, a horse, a bear, or the ever-popular walrus. You take a moment to admire the craftsmanship. Someone in the household clearly knows their way around a whittling knife. You finish your stitch, tie a knot, and snip the thread with a small blade. The tunic is better. Not perfect. But Vikings weren't aiming for runway ready, just something that wouldn't fall off mid-harvest. You fold it and add it to a growing stack near the hearth. The air now carries a slightly sharper scent. Someone's boiling down pine resin in the side hearth, likely to waterproof boots or bind tool handles. It smells like walking into a forest after a storm. Sticky, pungent, and oddly calming. Across the room, another small group is preparing for dyeing. There's a basket of lichen being crushed, and someone's pouring vinegar over bark in a small ceramic pot. Natural dyeing is a lot of guesswork and luck, especially when you don't have precise thermometers and digital timers. You just trust the smell, the color, and the cranky advice of whoever has the grayest braid. You offer to stir the lichen mixture, and soon you're hunched over a small pot, swirling what looks like a swamp with a stick. Steam rises gently, and your eyes sting a little from the acidity. Someone nearby jokes that your eyelashes might turn green. You chuckle, mostly because your eyes are already watering too much to glare properly. Nearby, one of the men is reshaping a fishing net. Each knot is tied by hand, and you admire the precision. It's a job requiring patience, strong fingers, and an unreasonable tolerance for tedium. And yet, he hums as he works, tapping one foot in time with the rhythm of the knots. The door creaks open, letting in a shaft of amber light. A teenage girl comes in, carrying a woven basket filled with fresh herbs, some for cooking, others for salves and teas. She empties her haul onto a low bench, and the scents of sage, juniper, and yarrow curl around the room like invisible ribbons. You take a sprig of something unfamiliar and hold it to your nose. It's sharp, peppery, and oddly citrusy. She tells you it's called Angelica, useful for digestion, headaches, and driving away unwanted suitors. You're not sure which one you need most. A little later, you're handed a wooden comb and a hunk of something vaguely resembling soap. Time for a wash. Hygiene isn't exactly a luxury in the Viking world. It's a weekly battle. But today, you've been deemed ripe. So off you go to the wash area near the back of the house, separated by a thin partition and an even thinner concept of privacy. The soap is made from ashes and animal fat, scented faintly with pine. It's abrasive, like scrubbing yourself with a remorseful rock. But it works. You splash cold water over your face and arms, grit your teeth, and feel vaguely reborn, if also slightly numb. Cleanish, you pat yourself down with a cloth that feels like it used to be a sail. You comb your hair, too. The wooden comb drags through tangles, bringing the occasional flinch and an entirely invented Norse curse. Still, Vikings took grooming seriously. There's even archaeological evidence of tweezers, razors, and ear spoons. That's right, ear spoons. For the ultimate in medieval hygiene, one dainty scoop at a time. Refreshed, if a little pink-faced, you return to the hearth and settle on a cushion. You pick up your carving again. The pattern's coming along. Slowly, carefully, you scratch in a swirl, a loop, a knot. Someone's feeding the fire now. Sparks leap upward, glowing against the soot-dark beams. The warmth settles around your shoulders like a heavy wool shawl. You notice someone slipping a small offering into the fire, a sliver of bread, a whisper of mead. A quiet thank you to the spirits, maybe, or to the ancestors, or to the very fire itself. You do the same, tearing off a crust and dropping it gently into the flames. The bread crackles, curls, and disappears. Whether it works or not, you feel a little more connected, a little more at peace. Evening is tiptoeing in. The house grows dimmer, the hearth light more golden. Shadows move like slow dancers across the wooden walls. You stretch your legs, crack your knuckles, and lean back with a soft sigh. The day's getting ready to exhale. As the golden glow of evening deepens, you find yourself slipping into a gentler rhythm. The sounds of the longhouse are soft now. The low hum of voices, the occasional chuckle, the hush of someone shifting on a fur-covered bench. There's a kind of sleepy choreography to it all, like everyone's agreed, without saying a word, to move a little slower and speak a little softer. Dinner is still a little while off, and you're not quite ready to be idle, so you wander towards the loom. It stands tall and sturdy in the corner of the longhouse, threads stretched taut like harp strings. It's a warp-weighted loom, the kind that leans against the wall with heavy stones, called loom weights, hanging from the bottom. Simple, but deeply clever. You run your fingers gently over the yarn, noticing how your fingertips catch on the coarser wool, dyed in earthy tones. Nothing neon here, just soft reds, dusky yellows, and the occasional rich blue when the woad gods are feeling generous. A woman is already working at the loom, her movements deliberate and practiced. She smiles at you, then hands you the shuttle. You're not expected to do much, just a few passes. Under, over, over. She beats the weft into place with a carved wooden sword, a tool that looks like a weapon, but is used to create instead of destroy. Weaving is sacred work in this culture. not just functional, but laced with myth. The Norns, the Norse goddesses of fate, were said to weave the destinies of gods and men alike. Every thread you place feels like it might ripple through someone's story, tugging gently at the course of their day. You wonder if the Norns ever got tangled threads or lost their patience when the shuttle slipped. Probably. Even divine weavers must have off days. A child scampers past, nearly knocking over a basket of yarn. She squeaks an apology and is quickly roped into winding thread instead. You can't help but smile. That's how you learn in the Longhouse, by watching, by trying, and by occasionally getting it wildly wrong. No textbooks, just tasks, repetition, and the occasional playful scolding. Behind you, a gentle melody begins. Someone's pulled out a lyre, 6 strings, curved wood, and a voice as old as sagas. The music is delicate, almost hesitant at first. Then it finds its footing. A simple tune drifts through the room, meandering like a stream. Your fingers slow on the shuttle. The rhythm of the loom syncs up with the song in a kind of peaceful duet. It's during these quiet moments that the stories begin. One of the elders clears his throat, then launches into a tale so smoothly it feels like he's picking up a conversation you left days ago. He tells of a jarl who tricked death by hiding in a fish barrel. Someone chimes in with a different version, where the jarl disguises himself as a goat. There's laughter, debate, and a few overly dramatic goat impressions. You learn quickly that Norse storytelling is as much about humor as it is about honor. One fact you've picked up in your time here. Historians still argue whether the sagas we know today are faithful retellings or wildly embellished folklore polished up for Christian scribes centuries later. Probably a mix of both. After all, who doesn't love a little narrative flair? You ease away from the loom, offering the shuttle back with a nod of thanks, and make your way toward the benches near the back wall. A few folks are preparing for dinner. Clay bowls are being set out, wooden spoons passed hand to hand. No table settings, no candles in silver holders. Just functionality, plain and pleasant. A large pot steams over the hearth. Tonight's meal smells earthy and rich. Barley, leeks, some bits of dried fish, or perhaps seal meat. There's also a second pot with a thick pea and herb mash that's surprisingly tasty if you don't look directly at it. You're handed a bowl and offered a generous ladleful. The warmth seeps through the wooden bowl into your palms. You take a seat among the others, cross-legged on a fur-covered bench, and begin to eat. It's not gourmet cuisine, but it's filling, and it's shared, which makes it taste better. Every now and then, someone reaches over to pass a crust of bread or a skin of mead. You eat slowly, savoring the little things, the crunch of the barley, the sting of the herbs, the slightly overcooked root vegetable that everyone diplomatically pretends is just fine. A woman across from you begins humming again, this time a lullaby. The melody is older than memory, soft and hypnotic. A toddler on her lap slowly droops sideways, cheeks sticky with mashed peas, eyelids sinking like stones in a pond. The meal winds down without ceremony. Bowls are stacked, spoons licked clean and wiped with cloth. There's no real end to dinner here. Just a slow, collective drift toward post-meal calm. A few people wander outside to relieve themselves or stretch their legs beneath the slowly darkening sky. You follow them, just for a moment, stepping out into the evening air. It's cool and damp, the sky a deep gray blue. The longhouse glows faintly behind you, smoke curling up from the roof vents like sleepy wisps. You can hear the ocean faintly in the distance, just a hush, a breath, a reminder of where this world begins and ends. Back inside, the longhouse is dim now. A few oil lamps flicker near the walls, fed with animal fat and trimmed with wicks made from moss. Their flames dance in the gentle drafts that snake between the logs. Everything is tinted warm gold and deep shadow. The last of the chores wind down. Someone carefully folds a woolen tunic and places it near the fire to keep dry. Another adjusts the bedding. A series of straw-stuffed mattresses covered in thick sheepskins. You settle onto yours, already pulled into place near the side wall. It's firm, a little uneven, but warmer than expected. A fellow sleeper hands you a spare cloak, worn soft with use. You drape it over your legs and stretch out with a long exhale. Someone tells one final story, half dream, half history. You don't catch every word. You're drifting already. Outside, the wind picks up slightly. The longhouse creaks, as if sighing too. Your eyelids grow heavy, your breath steady, and your body melts into the rhythm of the house. The night has fallen fully now, and the longhouse settles into its most serene state, dim, drowsy, and dense with the scent of smoke, wool, and salted wood. You lie still, wrapped in layers of wool and fur, listening to the softened symphony of a Viking household sleeping. Occasionally someone stirs, a quiet cough, a shift on straw, the muted grunt of a child adjusting in their sleep. There's no sense of privacy in the longhouse, not in the way modern homes are structured. Yet strangely, it doesn't feel intrusive. It feels shared, communal. Like everyone here is part of the same slow, swaying boat drifting through the dark. But sleep doesn't claim everyone at once. Around the low embers of the hearth, a few insomniacs linger. They don't speak much, just tend the fire, adjust kindling, maybe hum softly under their breath. You slip quietly from your bedroll, moving carefully over the sleeping forms of your bunkmates. Tonight, you're one of the restless ones. You join the fire watchers without a word. They nod at you, and someone hands over a cup carved from horn. Inside is a warm drink, not quite tea, but steeped with herbs, perhaps nettle or yarrow. It's slightly bitter, slightly sweet, and deeply comforting. You sip slowly, savoring each hint of wildflower and wood smoke. Around you, the longhouse glows like a lantern lit from within. You notice things now that were easy to miss earlier. The carved motifs on the bed frames, spirals, beasts, and leaves. The subtle shimmer of iron tools tucked just behind posts. A bundle of dried herbs hanging from a rafter, still fragrant despite the soot. One of the elders leans in to whisper a story. You don't ask for it. She just begins, as if the tale's been simmering in her throat for hours, waiting for an open ear. She speaks of night spirits, the Huldra and the Draugr, shadows that walk the earth while others sleep. Not all scary, she insists with a wink. Just misunderstood. The Draugr, for instance, aren't necessarily malicious, just cranky, especially if you build your longhouse over their burial mound. An honest mistake, really. You stifle a laugh, careful not to wake the nearest sleepers. She continues, describing how some believed dreams were journeys, not metaphors, but actual spirit wanderings. If you had a particularly vivid dream, they said, it was your soul stretching its legs. This is why it was considered rude to wake someone suddenly. It might snap the cord tethering their soul to their body. Better to rouse them gently, let the spirit shuffle back in, like a sleepy cat returning to its windowsill. You muse on that for a moment, watching the fire's red-orange glow reflect in her eyes. Historians still debate just how seriously Norse societies took these dream beliefs. Some think they were deeply ingrained. Others suggest they were more the domain of poets and priestesses than practical farmers. As with much of Viking-era life, the truth likely lies somewhere between saga and sheep dung. Behind you, a baby whimpers in sleep, and a mother gently pats her back without waking. The rhythm is so automatic, so familiar, it seems older than the building itself. You finish your drink and return the cup with a murmur of thanks. Someone adds another log to the fire, which crackles in response. The shadows stretch and twist again. As you prepare to return to your sleeping spot, your eye catches something odd, just a small carved figure sitting on a nearby shelf. A horse, maybe, but stylized. All angles and knots. It's a toy, worn smooth by dozens of little hands. You pick it up and turn it in your fingers. Simple, but beautiful. A child's imagination could turn it into anything. A warhorse, a ship, even a dragon. You place it back with care, feeling a flicker of warmth that's got nothing to do with the fire. Slipping back onto your bedding, you try to quiet your mind. You pull the wool cloak over your shoulder and wiggle your toes to warm them. The longhouse breathes around you, a living structure, creaking softly as if it too is dreaming. Now and then, you hear the distant hoot of an owl outside, carried in on a draft through the vent. The sea is quieter now, its roar reduced to a murmur, like someone speaking through sleep. You drift toward dreams, thinking of what the elder said, that your soul might already be wandering, stretching through ancient forests, skimming the surface of fjords, maybe even brushing against a drifting ship miles from shore. The fire pops once, sharp and sudden, then dies back into a murmur. Sleep finally reaches you fully, heavy, gentle, total, and then morning begins again. Not all at once, not sharply, but with small signs. A rooster crows somewhere in the distance, possibly next door, or possibly halfway up a hillside, because roosters aren't known for punctuality. A dog barks once, offended by something entirely invisible. And someone begins to stir. You blink slowly. The light has changed. A faint bluish hue filtering in through the smoke hole above. It's not sunrise yet, but it's close. You roll to one side and stretch, careful not to elbow the sleeper next to you. Someone sneezes. Another groans. Someone lets out the kind of yawn that doubles as a morning song. And so the cycle begins again. A new day, with new chores, new complaints about the weather, and probably the same stew reheated in a slightly different pot. You pull on your woolen socks and rise, feeling every creak in your knees. The fire is being coaxed back to life. A few embers remain from the night, and a careful hand feeds them with dry moss and thin kindling. You can already smell the first promise of warmth. You help without needing to be asked. That's how things work here. Everyone pitches in, even if all you can do is rub your eyes and hold a log steady. It's not glamorous, it's not grand, but it's home. And for now, that's enough. The embers crackle awake, and so do you, slowly, without fanfare, like most things in a Viking longhouse. The air is still cold, nipping at your fingers as you reach to stretch. Someone mutters about frost, though they say it with more reverence than complaint. A good frost keeps the insects at bay, after all. Everything here has its purpose, even the cold. You shake out your tunic and pull it over your head. It still smells like last night's smoke, with just a hint of goat. Honestly, everything smells like goat after a while. It's the longhouse's bass note, like a perfume, but one curated by livestock. Breakfast is brewing. Not bacon and eggs. Those are far-off luxuries from someone else's continent and century. Here, it's a porridge morning. You can smell it already, thick and earthy, made from barley or oats, depending on the trade goods lately available. Some days it tastes like toasted grain and patience. On special days, there's a swirl of honey or a few crushed berries for color. Today smells plain, solid, very beige. You rub your eyes and look around. The family is beginning to animate like a slow sunrise. Someone is sweeping, another checking the fire pit, a pair of teens pretending not to be told to do anything. You've all done this before. There's a rhythm to these mornings that no one questions. You feed the hearth, not just with wood, but with your effort, your mood, your attention. If the fire's strong, the day might be too. And speaking of fire, someone outside has started clanging something metal, maybe repairing a pot or shoeing a horse. It's the Viking version of an alarm clock. Loud, sudden, and slightly passive-aggressive. Outside the longhouse, the world is shaking off the night. You can just make out the bleating of sheep, still penned in, and a shout from the fjord as someone checks on their boat. The mist is rising in thick, swirling tendrils, and every surface glistens with dew. It's beautiful, but it also means wet socks. Again, you help portion the porridge into wooden bowls, one of which has a small chip on the rim shaped like a crescent moon. You always choose that one, partly from habit, partly from superstition. Everyone has their favorite bowl. Some of the younger kids insist that theirs makes the porridge taste better. No one corrects them. A few grains spill onto the floor, and a chicken waddles over boldly, pecking at your feet. Chickens have no sense of personal space, and even less of manners. They're the unbothered royalty of the longhouse courtyard. Someone laughs softly as the bird hops up onto a stool, eyeing your bowl like it might make a grab for it. It doesn't, but the threat is real. You guard your breakfast with one hand while eating with the other. It's not long before conversation begins. Quiet, fragmented, sleepy. A father grumbles about repairing the fence. A grandmother offers unsolicited advice on someone's cough. A boy reports that the dog dragged a whole fish into the sleeping area during the night. No one is surprised. You sip from a carved cup of water flavored with herbs. Woodruff, maybe, or sweet Sicily. It tastes like a meadow that's been gently trampled. Refreshing, but slightly suspicious. As the sky lightens, tasks begin to divide. The men check weapons and tools, preparing for a training morning or a hunt. The women prepare dye baths and loom threads, pausing occasionally to swap gossip that sounds suspiciously like saga embellishments. Who did what? Who said what? Who looked at whose neighbor with eyes that spoke of midsummer? Historians still debate just how clearly gender roles were drawn in Viking society. While some argue roles were strictly defined, others point to evidence of female warriors, landowners, and travelers. The sagas give us fierce shield maidens, but archaeology gives us loom weights. And maybe both are true. You, meanwhile, are assigned to fetch water. It's a humbling task. The spring isn't far, but the buckets are heavy, and the slope slippery. Still, it gives you time to think. You walk slowly, eyes adjusting to the morning glare. The landscape stretches before you. Craggy hills, narrow paths, and the occasional puff of smoke from distant farms. You pass a neighbor, his beard coated with frost, carrying a bundle of firewood twice his width. He nods in greeting, says nothing, keeps moving. That's the Viking version of small talk. At the spring, you kneel and let the water fill the buckets slowly, feeling the chill seep into your fingers. A few birds call out overhead. Ravens, maybe. Clever and smug, always watching. In Norse mythology, ravens are the eyes and ears of Odin, which feels a bit unfair to your privacy, but oddly majestic too. On the way back, you spot hoofprints in the soft earth. Not from the village's horses. Too small, too sharp. Possibly from wild goats, or trolls. Just kidding. Probably goats. When you return to the longhouse, it's alive with motion. Someone's repairing a leather harness. A toddler is chasing that same bold chicken in tiny, stomping steps. A woman is hanging strips of dried fish from a low beam. The smell is assertive. You place the buckets by the wash area and wipe your hands on your tunic, which now has more water on it than before. Progress. Someone calls your name, or your Viking name anyway, which translates loosely to something like Ashbrow or they who fetch porridge with speed. You respond with a grunt, as is customary. And then, because there is no clock to dictate when you do or don't, you sit for a moment. Sit, breathe, take in the world. the smoke curling into patterns, the gentle chuff of a horse outside, the buzz of early chores, the same ones done yesterday and the day before that. You realize something, not about history or sagas or daily routine, but about comfort, about continuity. There is peace in repetition, in mornings that begin not with a bang, but with barley. Not dramatic, but grounding. And as your bowl of porridge cools beside you, you think, maybe that's enough. The mist outside has lifted, and with it, the longhouse settles into a low, contented hum. Not silent, never quite that, but quiet in the way a well-functioning day is quiet. Tasks are underway, but no one is rushing. You sit for a moment longer, your back against a support post, watching the morning unfurl like a slow saga. Now it's time for the mid-morning wash. Not a full bath, let's not get ahead of ourselves, but a splash of cold spring water on the face, maybe the hands, and, if you're feeling bold, your feet. Hygiene, Viking style. You dip a cloth into the bucket you carried earlier and wipe the sleep from your eyes. The water is crisp, bracing, an icy little slap from nature. It wakes you up better than any modern espresso shot. Nearby, a pair of children are braiding each other's hair. Tight, intricate patterns you suspect may be passed down like heirlooms. The older of the two hums a tune that sounds like it might have been taught to her by someone who heard it from someone who heard it during a storm in a fjord. Hair in Viking culture was a kind of visual resume. Clean, braided hair? Responsible? Warrior-level beard? Strong and maybe just a bit intimidating. Wild, unkempt tangles? Possibly a poet. Or someone who just hasn't found their comb. Speaking of which, you spot your own wooden comb tucked into the crevice of the sleeping platform. You run it through your hair once or twice. It snags a little. You wince. But it does the job. These combs were often intricately carved, made from antler or bone. Historians still debate whether these everyday grooming tools were considered luxury items or simply essentials. Either way, they make your hair smell faintly of juniper and longhouse smoke. Outside, someone is calling for help with a thatched repair. You walk toward the sound, squinting up at the roof. Thatch isn't glamorous, but it keeps out most of the rain, most of the time. Climbing up with a bundle of reeds, you notice just how many repairs the roof has gone through. Layers of past patchwork efforts, some skilled, some clearly experimental, are woven like a record of seasons gone by. Up here, you get a view you don't often see. The fjord in the distance, the grazing fields, the boats moored like resting animals. The world feels calm, like it's holding its breath. A woman joins you on the roof, handing you another bundle. "Careful of the soft spot," she warns, grinning. "You step wrong and you'll land in the pig pen. Again. It's not just a joke. You remember the last time someone went through the roof and into the slop. A story retold with such frequency that it's now halfway to becoming legend. A saga of embarrassment. You work quietly, laying the reeds, tying them with thin strips of bark. The method hasn't changed in generations. Every now and then, you glance down to see someone churning butter by hand, rocking side to side with the rhythm of the task. Another person sharpens a knife with slow, deliberate strokes. There's a toddler trying to sweep the yard with a stick twice their size. It's clumsy and entirely ineffective, but no one stops them. There's no real lunch in the Viking longhouse. Just a continuation of the morning meal, stretched thin through grazing, shared bites, and whatever was left from last night's stew pot. Someone is roasting onions over a low fire. You wonder if they'll end up in today's stew or simply be eaten warm, like a treat. Viking snacks weren't flashy, but they had charm. By midday, things grow warmer. Not hot, never hot, but enough to remove your outer tunic. You tie it around your waist and take a seat by the open doorway, your legs stretched into the sunbeam like a cat who's earned its nap. The light casts stripes across the dirt floor, highlighting the etchings on your boots, the texture of the wool blanket beside you. A few of the longhouse's elders begin to murmur stories. Old ones, not sagas for glory, but sleepy, rambling ones. About a tree that grew sideways, a goat that wouldn't cross a stream unless someone promised it bread. The kind of stories that don't end, they just wander. You close your eyes, not to sleep, just to listen. The words wash over you, and you realize this is the Viking version of a podcast. No visual effects, no music, just a human voice, pacing through memories. Suddenly, a horn sounds in the distance. You tense for a moment. It could mean danger or just a messenger. Turns out, it's a neighbor from a nearby homestead, arriving with news of a gathering. Something about a shared feast next week. Maybe a naming ceremony, or the return of a boat crew. You're invited, naturally. Everyone is. These events are the social glue of the Longhouse Network. You look around at your companions. Some nod at the news, some raise an eyebrow in interest, others seem entirely unbothered. You, for your part, are already imagining what you'll bring. Dried fish, a carved spoon, maybe that one bowl with the crescent chip. Symbolic, if slightly unsanitary. As the day winds down, you take on one last chore, helping patch a cloak. The wool is heavy, the needle blunt, the thread stiff. You work slowly, pricking your finger more than once. A child offers a scrap of cloth as a bandage and laughs when you tie it around like it's a warrior's battle wound. The longhouse dims again, light fading in through the smoke holes. You smell fresh rushes being laid on the floor and the faint tang of iron from a newly sharpened axe. Someone's humming again. Maybe the same tune, maybe not. You place your needle down, stretch your arms, and take one more look around. Same place, different day. And yet it feels new. Every detail, from the faint soot on the ceiling beams to the half-melted beeswax candle, sings of a life lived slowly but fully. And as everyone begins to shuffle back into the sleeping spaces, finding their sheepskins and familiar spots, you feel something settle. Not just your body, but your whole self. You're here, you're part of it. The longhouse exhales, and so do you. The fire dims, and so does the world around you. You curl into your place on the sleeping platform, the sheepskin warm beneath you, your limbs heavy in the best possible way. Around you, the sounds of the longhouse soften into whispers. Wood creaking, someone sighing in their sleep, the last sleepy murmur from a restless chicken finding a new perch. You hear the faint drip of water from the corner bucket, the distant howl of wind brushing the roof. It doesn't feel threatening. It feels ancient, like the kind of wind that has always been here, passing over hills, through fjords, whispering lullabies to those willing to listen. The wool blanket pulls snug around your shoulders, and the smell of smoke and herbs lingers in the air. A sleepy perfume of stories lived and stories yet to come. A cradle of yesterday and tomorrow. You shift once, then still, letting go. Outside, the moon begins her watch, silver light casting shadows that stretch and yawn. The world quiets. The day closes. You've fetched water, woven roof reeds, guarded your porridge from chickens, and climbed a roof to patch the sky. You've watched braids being tied and stew being stirred, and now you sleep. You're not just watching history tonight, you're part of it. The longhouse fades, slowly, gently, like a candle sighing out in the dark. Good night.